Sword of Coming Chapter 939. In the territory of Mengliang Country, the Huangliang School, which is the neighbor of Yunxia Mountain, is named Zhou Xian and is located in Biei County, Huai'an Prefecture, Mengliang Country. Ever since the Huangliang faction bought a mountain peak to the west of the former site of Lizhu Dongtian, it seemed to have been losing luck all the time and began to turn to good fortune. In the early years, I used a bag of Spring Festival money as a way to buy money, and then used the remaining bag to win the money. The price of the clothing belt peak bought from the Dolly Court has doubled several times. Then the teacher Lu Hongwen, who was sent to Yidefeng for retirement, got acquainted with the Luopa Mountain. Qin Lingjun, the worshipper of the Luopa Mountain, is a very close drinking buddy. The uncle has also participated in several night banquets in the Beiyue Piyun Mountain. How can it be regarded as a familiar face with Wei Shanjun? In the words of my uncle Lu Hongwen, at that Wei Shanjun's night banquet, the seats are in the front row, which time is not under yuaning. My position is the most front, just talk about the landscape god sitting opposite me. Twice was the river righteous of the Xihua River, and once was the Zhou Chenghuangi of Longzhou. In the Shanshui officialdom of the Dali Imperial Court, which one is worse? In the Mengliang Country, even if the Wuye Mountain monarch with the highest rank, can he sit aside with the embroidered river god? After that, there was a descendant of the patriarch who had high hopes, and he really succeeded in making it into the Golden Core. This is how the Huangliang faction will celebrate the inauguration of the first month of the next year. 3 gold cores within 1 door. In addition, the disciple of the closed door who rested in the head, the one who went to the Lizhu cave to seek for no results. Now there are signs that the bottleneck of the Dragon Gate realm has loosened. Earlier, Gao Zhen had a gentleman's agreement with his uncle. Since uncle has really completed that gambling agreement, and indeed invited guests from Luopa Mountain for the Huangliang sect, then Yidefeng naturally doesn't have to sell it. Huangliang Pai specially selected 2 neighboring mansions with the best scenery. The young man in Confucian shirt, named Li Huai, claimed to be from Shania Academy, and the yellow-clothed old man beside him seemed to be a follower. His name was Holu and he did not have a surname. The Taoist name was Longshan Gong. On the top of Guan, it was shown that he was a casual xiu from Nanpa Suzhou. He had falcon-eyed and eagle-eyed eyes, but he wore a magnanimous robe. Since this pair of masters and servants were unexpected visitors, there was some speculation on the Huangliang faction. If you want to come to this college, most of them belonged to the tycoons at the foot of the mountain. Only when they were young they had a monk to serve as a follower. At this moment, Li Huai was flipping through a book similar to Literati's notes in the house. It was a yellowed book that was picked out from the corner of the bookshelf. It was sealed with several seals, which seemed to be the collections of local literati in Mengliang Country. Ordered, and there is a sticky note on the last 2 pages of the book, which roughly explains the origin of the book. It was obtained from a place called Fen Shrine and was a gift from the temple. Since Li Huai had the status of a scholar in academy, the Huangliang school gave such an elegant house. The plaque couplet, the 4 treasures of the study and the Qing dynasty confession have everything you need, and a few calligraphy cylinders are filled with scrolls of calligraphy and painting. Li Huai is actually very ashamed, but it's not easy to yell. In fact, I don't read much. The Taoist Nin was sitting on the threshold like sleeping but not sleeping, digging into the ancient book, and the old blind man threw it to himself as rubbish. Unfortunately, it was only the upper half of the book. But only the first half has benefited the Taoist Nin a lot. He and the old ancestor Yuan, one of the old thrown big monsters in the wild world, naturally had a great dispute, and the latter moved the mountain. It is similar to the Nin Taoist Hushan, the technique and the height of the Taoism. The only way is to refining the mountain dragon vein, eat the mountain. The real name Zhu Wei, the head of Yuan, seems to have gotten a door from the side of the head in Yangji. Ancient magical powers. This makes both parties are also ascendant realm great monks. Zhu Fei long ago is that the Tao realm tends to consummation. The wild Tao pavilion is a slightly inferior peak. Only when the realm is completed can you have the capital and confidence. Pursue that illusory 14 realms. It's not that Taoist Nin had not moved his mind before, and wanted to ask Li Huai to beg the old blind man. As a result, Li Huai's 2 words dispelled Taoist Nin's thoughts. If I am willing to help you, but you really think I begged? Most of my master is willing to give you the lower half of the ancient score? Take a step back. Even if he can't save face on my side and gave you the lower half, do you really dare to practice? The Taoist Nin sighed. His son is really not stupid. Li Huai is hiding for his holiness, so it's hard to say it straight. Most of his old blind man who is a master speaks very well to him, Li Huai, but it's hard to say on your side, Lao Nen. In fact, this wild peach pavilion is only on the side of the old blind man, covering all the limelight. Otherwise it will only be on the side of Yuanyangzu from Nangguangguang to the fairy cloud, and then to the distant spectacles of Qin Zhao strict and Tian. And Igilio, who would dare to regard this tender Taoist as an indifferent old man? As for Taoist Nen, before he became the watchdog of the 100,000 mountains in that wild world, since he could fight a few solid fights with the old throne Yuanshou, wouldn't it be annoying? In the wild history, there was once a young soaring realm with a reputation. The so-called Little Yuan Shou moved to the mountain. The fire was perfect. In just 1,000 years he did not know that he had eaten hundreds of hills in the Patriarch Hall. So much so that the outside world is speculating about his chance of winning against Tao Ting, and some guesses are at least 50%. The result was that this inexperienced great monk was really blocked by Tao Pavilion during a trip. The two sides fought and fought for 1,000,000 miles away. After a hearty battle, only Tao Pavilion was left. One, suspended in the air, patted his stomach, burped, and only said, 50% full. Li Huai asked curiously, why did there have been so many golden core monks in the history of the Huangliang school, but there was not a single Yuan Ying? Is feng shui a bit weird? Taoist Nen said with a smile, it may be borrowed and repaid. Before on that ferry as a well-deserved master in the world of Hushan, the Taoist Nen found out the ins and outs of Lushan. It was an unusual geomantic treasure, so that the Taoists of Nen needed to figure out the calculations. I discovered an inconspicuous distraction in the Lushan area. There is a grotto dojo hidden between the cliffs. It just belongs to the place where Daobing Xuanji is reflected. There was an expert here who gets the Dao, and the lingering rhyme of Dao Qi. It lasts for a long time and is not eye-catching, but it is extremely concise and introverted, so it is extremely difficult to find. If you say that the mountains of Lushan are a prominent, official appearance like a person wearing scarlet clothes, anyone who knows a little bit of aura, you can see the depth, so this place belongs to the treasure gourd selected for deep planting, bred a longevity treasure, and that ground vein is an official goldfish bag that looks like a natural blindfold. Seeing that his son was confused, the Taoist nun explained patiently, this Huangliang sect, when the early luck was the most prosperous, it is said that a few worshippers and Kiching were added. In a patriarch hall there are 12 golden cores. At that time Beipingzu was not a well-deserved first-rate fairy house. But there was a Taoist man who was proficient in the prosperity and decline of everything, and he accumulated some wealth for Lushan year after year. Over time, it became a treasure house as just a monk of the Huangliang school. A true monastic embryo has never appeared, so he cannot enter it because this treasure house requires a key and someone needs to open the door. Li Huai was amazed. The Patriarch's Hall is discussing matters, and there are 12 golden core immortals sitting at the same time. It's magnificent. Therefore the Huangliang school at that time looked at Yunxia Mountain even with Yuanying sitting on the top of the hill, with a condescending sight. Moreover, the relationship between Huangliang school and Mengliang country can be understood very well only by looking at the name of the school and the name of the country. Compared with Yunxia Mountain, the depths of the monarchs of the past must have been closer to Lushan naturally. Of course, they are willing to spare no effort to support the Huangliang school. The tender Taoist laughed. What if the 12 earthly immortals were in the barren world where only one person needed food for their cultivation? Whether you are a golden pill or a yuaning, it is not enough to take a bite by yourself. Li Huai curiously asked, Gao Master is considered a sword fairy, isn't he the one who has the key to open the door? The Taoist Nin choked for a while. I wanted to say that the head of the Huangliang faction was just a golden core sword repairer with poor aptitude, which was nothing. Just getting along with Li Huai day and night, knowing that his son doesn't like this kind of rhetoric, so the Taoist Nin changed his opinion. Sit back and forth from the so-called monastic embryo, it's still a bit far away. The Lord of the Mountain Master sits back and is an old young golden pill. Only because of the diligent practice of the Tao for 300 years he was also a genius with high hopes. It didn't take too many years to observe the two bottlenecks of the sea, but it was stagnated in the Longmen realm for nearly 200 years. According to the counting method on the mountain, it became the Dao age of the Jindang, in fact only 40 years. In the early years he was able to serve as the Yellow Liang sect mountain master in the Longmen realm. The only reason was the high-pitched sword repair identity. The Huangliang sect was up and down. For hundreds of years, there were only 2 sword repairs, and the younger one is now he was a child who had gone up the mountain for a few years. Although he was found at the foot of the mountain by a monk of the Huangliang faction, and he led the mountain himself, the final result was not surprising. This is a common practice in the mountains in the world. For example, Tianwan Jiu Fengshenwan on Xingyang Mountain has found Su Jia and Wu Tijing. These 2 sword fairy embryos will also change their gates on the mountain, leave Zifeng and switch to another vein. Mountain peak. So even the leader of the Huangliang sect, he didn't feel aggrieved at all, and even when the sword repairman worshipped and became his teacher, he was willing to give out a treasure that has been treasured for many years as a gift. The last mountain lord had made a will before the retreat. If he failed to retreat, he could only be disbanded and let him take over as the head. The relationship between Gao Zhen and his uncle Lu Hongwen is not harmonious, and it is because of this. Lu Hongwen is the most respectable and disciplined older monk, just like those old people in the rivers and lakes of the mountains, observing the old customs and feels that it will be a dragon. It's unreasonable to be the head of a mountain. How lavish my family's ancestors are. In this Aquarius island, if you stay in the dynasty under the mountain, you will be the kind of 4 generations and 3 masters. This kind of thing will be a big joke. Ashamed of the ancestors, what face is there to burn incense in the patriarch hall? After that, even if the head of the boss successfully formed a pill and became a well-known sword fairy, in the southern part of Aquarius, the relationship with his uncle Lu Hongwen did not relax much. Why do you want me? Lu Hongwen, an elder from the mountain gate who is a teacher, bow his head to admit his mistake with his nephew. Daoist Nin said helplessly, "Young master, how come Brother Jindan is on your side? Is he still a worldly expert?" Li Huai seemed to be even more helpless. "Don't the mountains say, it's my generation to form a golden pill guest party? Since I have become a land immortal, how come I am not an expert? I have only met some great monks and it's not me." "Great monk, right?" Daoist Nin immediately flattered and said, "The ordinary heart of the sun is more than 10,000 miles higher than my Taoist heart. It is hard to find and hard to find." Li Huai continued to flip through the book and read about half of the book. "I really couldn't read it anymore. I knew all the words. When I finished the sentence, I would often not understand it. I always felt that it was too mysterious and the truth was too great. Talking about the mysterious words of famous people, there is no margin and there is no high-level sermon in the blank space." Li Huai sighed. "It is not a piece of reading material, so I had to close the book, put it on the table and stretched out his hand to wipe it. Ping, even if it is not a seed of reading that can shine, you still have to treat the books you start with." Daoist Nin has become accustomed to it. As long as his son reads the book, he must frown earnestly, seriously. As for how much he can read, he. As for the copy of Mountain Refining in his hand, Daoist Nin wanted to let his son go through it, but Li Huai hurriedly waved his hand and shook his head, saying, "What am I doing with this? Do you understand? Even if the content of the text can be understood with my qualifications, can I practice? What do you think?" Lao Nin deliberately watching me make a joke. But to be honest, Daoist Nin felt that even if he had won the second half of Mountain Refining, Daoist Nin did not have the slightest confidence in the 14th stage. So Yuan Shou, relying on that battle, how many hills did Fuyao and Tongya eat? So what? It's not still an ascension. Let's talk about this vast world, Wei Shiavai's how. Before the Daoist Nin, who walked this place under the name of Longshan Gong and Ming Kulu, he had guessed the clues. This first-rate genius monk who was once known as the Aptitude crushed his peers, just above the word mountain, after suffering a great deal. It is very likely that 1 or even 2 times to the 14th level to no avail. Wei Shi will be so discouraged. "Old Nin?" Daoist Nin asked in doubt. "Young master, what's wrong?" Li Huai said, "I have an immature idea. Just listen to it. If it's wrong, if you feel naive, just hold back your laugh." Daoist Nin began to hold back his smile with a sullen face at this moment. "Master, please say." Li Huai whispered, "Lao Nin, your realm is so high, if you rely on moving to the top of the mountain, eating the mountains and then digesting them one by one with the magical powers of your life, of course you can add Taoism and raise your realm bit by bit. But I always feel away from your gods on the mountain, especially the avenue in the minds of the Taoist monks. There is a little distance away. The ancient book in your hand is not called Mountain Refining. After refining, is it possible to see places where there is no shortage of water but only mountains? Then you will occasionally spit out a few hills. Just like the book I just read, there is a sentence called 3,000 Accomplishments in Cultivation. It's the foundation of Taoism, the foundation of the law. It refers to the houses and residences where we live in the commonplace, not to mention the roots of the mountains. I think it makes sense. Wait a minute, let me turn over the book. Here there is also this sentence, the person who wrote this book. Here is another sentence, into the water and fire, to live in the mountains and jade. Why should I talk to me about the cave in heaven? It seems that there is also this sentence, you can use other mountain stones to attack jade. Other mountains are the mountains outside the body, and this jade is the mountains in the heart. Whether it is the so-called heaven and earth person of Taoism, the parent of all things, or the so-called heaven and earth rebellion of poets, or the one that Confucianism, Buddhism and Taoism like to mention, heaven and man are one. I think in the final analysis what it is, it's hard to say, but I'm sure at least one thing it's definitely not. Similar to chess, it's not that there must be a winner or loser. The matter of cultivating the Taoism is definitely not an antagonistic relationship between you and me, and you add me and you will reduce it. Putting it on Lao in you, if you just blindly ask for mountains, hills and dragon veins from the world and eat all the way, when will you be ahead? Can't eat all the 5 mountains and famous mountains in the world, right? I mean, if the whole world can be regarded as some kind of great monk who is similar to the spiritual path, he must face the endless fetching of monks in the world. If I don't give up, I'm afraid I'll find it annoying. Isn't that true? But I'm just a layman and I'm just a few nonsense. At first the Taoist Nin looked relaxed, but after hearing Li Huai utter the word Dao, his heart was shocked. For no reason he immediately asked the Taoist Nin to lift up his spirit, subconsciously straighten his waist and sit up. And when Li Huai said the phrase fundamentals of Taoism and law, Taoist Nin's expression changed. After the words Jishin Yulyin passed, Taoist Nin was already overwhelmed. Forget about it. When Li Huai spoke dry, he stopped talking. No matter whether Lao Nin sounded funny or not, Li Huai had already said that he was embarrassed. Incoherent, there are no rules about where to slide on the watermelon peel. Qin Pingon would be fine. The yellow-clothed old man suddenly recovered, reached out his hand and gently patted the threshold under the spanking and muttered, I have heard about it, I have seen it. Li Huai looked down at the cover of the book. The writer was named Lu Mingyan. The Taoist Nin was full of vigor, and if there was divine light in his eyes, he raised his head and asked, Master, who wrote this book? Li Huai smiled and said, Lu Yen, it seems to be a Taoist priest. Taoist Nin asked in confusion, which word, words or rocks? Li Huai said, the rock character on the top of the mountain. Taoist Nin stood up, shook his sleeves, faced Li Huai and the table and worshipped 3 times Li Huai, books and Lu Yen. At the neighboring house, Qin Lingjun squatted on the steps, watching Guozhuzhou walking and practicing boxing there. On the Huangliang school, there is no custom of eating New Year's Eve dinner in the mountains. Qin Lingjun and the Taoist Nin are all together, and the guest is just as he pleases, so let's just forget it, otherwise it will only make the Huangliang school feel embarrassed. Qin Lingjun asked, Guozhuzhou, you are Jianxiu, why do you walk here every day to practice boxing? Guozhuzhou jumped up high, swept his legs roundly and settled down and said, diligence can make up for one's clumsiness. Qin Lingjun rolled his eyes. Am I asking you about this? Guozhuzhou said suddenly, that person named Huang Tsong is really an emperor? That Huang Tsong was the first emperor Guozhuzhou saw after he came to Haoran world. Qin Lingjun stood up with his hands on his hips and said proudly, you said my Huang Tsong brother, that must be the emperor of a country, and there is no arrogance, right? It is that the amount of alcohol is poor and the rest can't be picked out. There is something wrong. Speaking of this, Qin Lingjun said bitterly, I have already let go. Guozhuzhou turned around to the master, can you help me say something nice? Guozhuzhou said, it is necessary. Instead, Qin Lingjun was stunned. Ah? Are you really willing to help? Guozhuzhou doubted. I saw master. I have a big basket of things to say, just a few good things to help you. It's just a small dustpan inside the big basket. Is there anything I want or not? Qin Lingjun nodded as fast as a chicken pecking at rice. His heart was warm and he almost burst into tears on the spot. 10 Wei Shanjun who don't talk about justice and justice are not as good as a chivalrous-hearted Guozhuzhou. Guozhuzhou suddenly stopped walking. Look for Li Huai. Qin Lingjun stood up and asked casually, why are you going? Guozhuzhou has always wanted to come out as soon as he came out. With a little tiptoe he jumped up to the wall and said, look for Li Huai and let him use his life's magical powers. The master sister said, it is very effective and has been tried. Qin Lingjun heard it loudly for a while and knew what Guizhuji was talking about. It meant that Li Huai painted ghost symbols on the ground and wrote Qin Pinggan's name again and again, and he could really see his master. Qin Lingjun looked up at the man who was already standing on the wall. The guy above said, Li Huai talks nonsense and the money is rumored to be rumored. Do you really believe it? Guizhuji, who was like a bird, walked away and said, Believe it, you will lose money. Qin Lingjun thought about it. It seems right. Immediately shouted, Wait for me. It's just that Guizhuji's habit of not going through the door and like going over the wall is really hard to teach people a word. Next time I see her master, my master, I must say something secretly. At the gate of the mountain, a talisman paper kite was used to send a letter to Lushan Zhu Xian. The paper kite flapped its wings, drawing a golden stream of fireflies in the air, and went straight to the Zhu mountain. It is not only a letter but also a good news. The two young monks temporarily serving as concierges, one male and one female, are both in the cave mansion realm, but they are both the hope of the future of the Huangliang school. Taking this opportunity, it is a kind of little red dust experience at the foot of the mountain. As for the real janitor, who was more sophisticated, he led a group of visitors up the mountain not long ago, but he has not yet descended. The two of them flushed, their eyes widened, and they looked like they would lose money after a short glance, and they looked at the blue shirt hard. If this happened to a green shirt guest outside the mountain, I would really not recognize it. Qin Pinggan had to smile and nod in greetings with them. The man grinned and the woman pursed his lips. He didn't think about how to speak properly and he still had no words. Divine God sect as the bullheader on the Aquarius mountain. Of course, to the monks of Izhou, it is like a thunderous existence. It's just that autumn view, I have never heard of it. And the blessed land of the Cloud Cave in Tonggishao is also very famous. It is the private land of the respected sect Master Jiang of Yuguizang. This immortal master and I can serve as the guest Qing of the blessed land of the Cloud Grottos, and he has joined forces with Chen Yingguan. He must be a strange person with extremely high Taoism. Only the sister named Qing Tong, who claimed to be from Mount Xiandu in Tonggishao, had no clue. Delivery gold is like iron and time comes like iron. This Huangliang Pai has a good time and it is considered that iron is hard by itself. For at least 300 to 500 years, you can really sit back and relax. Lu Chen lifted his sleeves with both hands, looked up at the Lushan Patriarch Hall and smiled with a heartfelt smile. I heard that the contemporary head of the Huangliang school is still a sword fairy? The name Gao headed is good, really good. When Pang Dao returns to Qingming, one day he has a cultivator embryo, and he plans to accept it as a direct descendant. He will definitely give him a Dao name called Worry-Free. Tell him or her, in the future, if you are successful in cultivating the Tao and can travel far to the vast world, you must come to the Huangliang sect as a guest and say a few words of thanks to the sword immortal named Gao Zhen. Qin Pinggan squinted at Lu Chen. Lu Chen learned everything squinting at Qing Tong. Qing Tong feels weak. I can't compare to the two of you, but am not a fool. Of course, Qing Tong also heard what Lu Chen meant. After Lu Chen returned to the Qingming world, he tried his luck and looked at his fate. In the future, the newly acquired direct disciple will have a worry-free Taoist trainer in the future. Even if the road is very smooth, the situation is as good as a broken bamboo, but if this person wants to travel far across the world, then at least it must be a great monk of Ascension realm, and then come to this mountain, see Gao Zhen with his own eyes and thank him personally, which means that Huangliang sect's Gao Zhen must wait for this day. As for a monk, it would take at least 1,000 years, even 2,000 to 3,000 years, to become an ascendant. Even if this person is a descendant of Bai Yujing's 3 sects, he has good roots and is willing to be a master. Lu Chen. He preached the Tao Fa and then piled up chances and treasures on him. 1,000 years, no matter how, it should be 1,000 years later. As for the Taoist pure son, didn't he also say, I have never taken the head of a man with a flying sword in the 800 autumn years since I got the Tao? Lu Yan's so-called achieving Tao refers to the formation of alchemy by himself, and the 800 years of cold and heat that has never sacrificed the flying sword refers to the years of practice before the ascension of the Tao. In addition, like Ningyao, the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the savage world is a rare example after all. From this, it can be seen that the years of Jianxiu's cultivation will not be short. Presumably, the current leader of the Huangliang school, who is extremely bumpy, will have some good luck in the future. Lu Chen smiled and said, How about Dong Senjen and the others? Have you forgotten them? And the hidden officer in front of you, do you dare to ignore it? The young fellow was anxious. Did Lu Zhangjiao imply that besides this official Chen, there is also Mr. Jing who is far away in the sky? Lu Chen rolled his eyes. My fellow Daoists, would you be too smart? Qin Pingon reminded. When you get to the mountain later, don't make troubles with moths. Lu Chen smiled and said, whenever you go out you will always be kind to others. Qin Pingon laughed off. Lu Chen asked, do you think that the pillow will be a great excitement? Call all the members of the Patriarch Hall, and rush to the foot of the mountain to pick you up? Ni Yuan Pin smiled and said, in other words, the Huangliang sect is also a fairy house that has seen the world, and it is not in the middle of the city. It is like the county grandfather has entered the country and village, and he has to beat the gongs and drums to appear solemn and polite. Lu Chen suddenly snorted and rubbed his chin. This is all right? It really means that there is no difference between the Wei and the Wei. Except for Ni Yuan Pin in the Yupu realm, they were still unaware. The others Qin Pingon and Qin Tong also noticed the mysterious Taoism ripples in the mountains. Qin Pingon asked in his heart, did Tao Ting find a way? Lu Chen nodded. However, it's almost meaningless from the realm of speaking under the Enlightenment. At present, this touting Taoist fellow can only say that he has found a possibility. No longer need to be desperate, eat and wait for death. Qin Tong said softly. Qin Pingan, since the Taoist Pure Yang spoke in person before, let you find the Dao sword art that points directly at the golden core. We passed by just now, why not take a look? Lu Shinren couldn't help but feel like, you can rest assured that fellow Daoists don't want to grab this chance with the hidden officer. Yo, the female congress is not in the middle of staying, so you turned your elbow to the hermit-sama so quickly? That's right, they are all kaching from Xindu Mountain. Qin Pingon said, I'm already watching it. Above Lushan, in a very elegant and quiet small courtyard pavilion, the head of the house is playing chess with a young man who looks like a scribe. The person who played with the pillow was Huang Tsong, the emperor of Mengliang Kingdom. Behind him stood a woman in a palace costume with strong water transport and a burly old man with a deep moral spirit. The prince of a country on the Lunar New Year's Day did not stay in the palace of the capital, as if it was the first time in the history of Huangliang Kingdom. Know that a monarch is always the busiest at this time. In Huang Tsong's own words, he just came to hide away. However, the young emperor was really committed to Taoism and was close to Taoism. In contrast, Xianxia Mountain, which is now the pillar of the Mengliang Kingdom, has practiced closer to the Dharma. So even if it is a major event such as the replacement of the Mountain Lord, His Majesty did not intend to go there to congratulate him in person. I was just going to let the Xianxia of the Ministry of Rites go up the mountain to observe the ceremony. Huang Tsong looked at the situation on the chessboard, twisted up a chess piece. His gaze wandered to reminisce about the old. He was always indecisive and laughed at himself. It seems that those chess in the palace are waiting for you compared with the gods who are good at chess on the mountain. It's a lot worse. He smiled and said, they may also lose to your majesty on purpose. Obviously, on the side of the emperor, there is nothing to be taboo from the emperor, let alone the polite words of, I am the first person to play chess in a country, and your majesty is an invincible player in a country. Huang Tsong smiled and nodded, it's possible. Of course it wasn't that he would sit back and be a sword cultivator in the Golden Core realm, so he regarded himself very highly, and felt that he was enough to look down upon the prince. Probably decades ago, except for the Dai dynasty, most of Ao Pingzhou did this. When the Song family of Dai had one country and one continent, especially on the top of the monuments and mountains, this situation has actually been achieved. After all, the current Huangliang school is on Lushan Mountain, not far from the entrance of the Patriarch Hall, and there is still such a monument. Even if the Aquarius Island south of Dadu has been restored, and is no longer a vassal of the Song clan of Dai, this monument, without any Xinfu sect, dared to remove it. There was a gossip saying that there were a few mountain sects before, and they felt that this monument was an eyesore, so they negotiated with the court under the mountain. Now that the state is restored, Dai is no longer the suzerain state, just move away. As a result, when a newspaper of Shanshui Mansion was passed from Middle-earth Shenzhou to Ao Pingzhou, it completely disappeared. One after another they announced Izhou through their own mansion reports, with different wordings and the same meaning. There is absolutely no such thing. Who dares to slander wantonly, must be investigated to the end. There was no way. The Dali dynasty had no embroidered tiger, and there was another hidden official in Aquarius. And these two happened to be brothers from the same line. Huang Tsong finally dropped the chess piece, glanced happily and said with a smile, "Your Majesty has lost." Huang Tsong nodded. He wanted to speak, but he swallowed his stomach again when the words came to his lips, twisted his head again and laughed and joked. "Master Gao, now you Huangliang faction can finally be lavish. Me alone as well as Nalan Water God Lord Maishan and our 3 congratulatory gifts, how can they be regarded as a large sum of money, let alone Yunxia Mountain? I will all envy, very envious." The water named Nalan said with a smile on her face. "Before I climbed the mountain, I persuaded your Majesty. It's better to put the gift I prepared with Jun Maishan into the royal treasury together. Anyway, the head of the house won't account for it. What's more, the goddess of water was dressed in blue, with colored threads wrapped around her arms, and a small talisman hanging diagonally with green clouds. Just by looking at her costume she knew that she was an admirer of Suzy." He laughed loudly and said, "This time I did not earn less. The most important thing is to finally get young Xian to congratulate him. It is not easy. Broad people live and get richer. The poor spend money on their lives and become poorer and poorer. Don't treat me face is not good, treat me swollen face to fill up the fat man." The guests go away after eating, turning around quietly hungry. The same goes for the mountains. In the early years with the neighbors who were a few steps away on the Yunxia mountain, I knew that there was suffering, a small amount of money, spending money like water. The key is the kind of red envelope that is destined to go and never return. Just talk about the green juniper peak Kaijinjian, the golden pill, the opening ceremony, and then become the Yuaning. How many gifts will the Huangliang sect send out? You can't make your shots too shabby, right? In addition, Yunxia Mountain's Taoist geniuses have been one after another. The Taoist couples on the mountain have become married, and XX has entered the Dongfu realm and became a middle 5 god, and some old teachers of the Yunxia Mountain Zhuxian who are familiar with the Huangliang school have received new ones. A direct disciple. In contrast, my own Huangliang Pai, that is, the situation has improved over the past few decades. Before that, it was really a bleak time for a dumb to eat coptis. For the opening ceremony this time, the Huangliang faction's original plan was of course to be held in a big way, so it was only for a guarantee. Just because of that unexpected joy, it is more than a capital preservation, it is simply a profit. The Huangliang faction had no idea whether it was possible to invite monk Luopashan, and with the mentality of trying it out, sent a polite invitation. Although the young hermit failed to come to congratulate him personally, Zhou Xian, as the chief steward, wrote a letter in the name of the patriarch of Jisifeng, explaining why his mountain lord could not participate in the celebration. If it is Qin Shanzhu who is unwilling to come, there is no need to bother at all. Just put the invitation letter of the Huangliang faction aside. Moreover, according to my uncle Qin Shanzhu, who is young, treats people sincerely, is kind and honest, and will never make a standoff with us on this kind of thing. No one at Master Lu Shan's think too much. It is that the eye sockets are shallow, and the gentleman's belly is saved with the heart of a villain. In the end, on the side of Luopa Mountain, 2 esteemed guests came to congratulate the climbers, Brother Yuanying and Qin Lingjun. Jindan Dixium Guizhujio. I heard that the former was the first genealogical monk who walked into the Luopa Mountain, so he didn't need to call any mountain lord, he just called the master. The latter is now the young disciple of Qin Shanzhu, so it can be regarded as half a closed disciple for the time being. Since she is the descendant of a young hermit, what if she is a sword repairman again? The Huangliang faction didn't even dare to publicize the matter because they were afraid that they would do things improperly, which would make Luopashan feel that they misunderstood that they wanted it, and that would turn a good thing into a bad thing. But there are no impervious walls in the world. When I heard that there were 2 monks with not low status on the side of Luopa Mountain, they had already stayed at the Lushan mansion. Once they passed on, it was known to all passers-by and they took the initiative. The guests who asked for the ceremony, some of them who hadn't been invited before, all came, and the number of people who attended the ceremony at least doubled. Even on Yunxia Mountain, a master and 2 old peak masters came. His Majesty the Emperor of Mengliang Kingdom even climbed the mountain himself. Maishan Jun, one of the 5 sacred mountains in a country and the first of water, are here. Don't you have to protect him? The Huangliang faction is in charge of the old monks who are greeted and sent off. Every day he complains endlessly while his eyes are full of smiles. For many years the Huangliang school has never been so beautiful. Huang Tsong got up before he talked again and stopped. Sit back, still, just ignore it, look low, staring at the chessboard. In fact, sit back and know why the emperor came to the mountain. The so-called hiding leisure or watching a ceremony, of course, are relatively lame excuses. The real idea is to see if there is a chance and forge an incense affair with Luapa Mountain. And do not expect the young hermits to set foot in the country of dreams. Huang Tsong didn't expect himself to be a guest at the Luapa Mountain and not eat a closed door. He only asked the Luapashan genealogical monks such as Qin Lingjun and Guizhujio to serve as an offering to Mengliang country as well as Kaching. It's just that this kind of thing can't be the Lord, and the emperor doesn't speak up, so he just pretends to be stupid and will never take the initiative to take the initiative. This young emperor who has enthroned in troubled times is still very high-spirited. Otherwise, if he is only asking for an offering and a guest for the Mengliang country, the big deal is to visit Xianxia Mountain in person and find an old fairy for the Mengliang country. The chief worship is actually not a difficult task. The surrounding countries of Mengliang Kingdom all know that this young emperor was wearing a dragon robe when he got off his horse back then. Because when Huang Tsong was still a prince, he took the initiative to lead his army to the battlefield of Dali, accompanying capital, and even the one who was actually lying in the dead and then found out. In that battle, Mengliangguo only talked about the Ministry of War, except for the old people. The young and strong officials almost all changed. Therefore, Huangliang's state in Ao Pingzhou was the first to rehabilitate the country after the end of the war and remove the status of the vassal. There are even many natives of the Mengliang state, and they are still in the Lubayaman and Xiajiqing Yamen of Daoist companion capital. Agency appointment. Seeing that Hai Pillow did not answer, Huang Tsong laughed at himself. There was no discomfort on his face and in his heart. Every family had difficult to recite sutras, so don't let Gao Zhongmen and Huangliang faction embarrass them. How could there be less formal doorways on the mountain than the officialdom under the mountain? Turn around and find the Master Xian who claimed to be nicknamed Xiao by Tiao and Yujiang Waves, Little Dragon King on the Fallen Mountain, and have a drink at the bar. But it is estimated that it was really just a drink. Last time Huang Tsong took the initiative to pay a visit with a cheeky face. This Tsing-yi childlike Yuan Ing Water Jiao old fairy, talkative, approachable, and especially appetite at the wine table, soon became brothers and brothers with himself. It's just that when it comes to serving as an offering to the Mengliang kingdom, the other party appears extremely determined. He can't make a decisive statement. It's impossible, and his master is not on the mountain. He can't do such a major event. Of course Huang Tsong was somewhat disappointed, but it was similar to the situation in the pavilion at this time with the pillows. The twisted melon is not sweet and does not embarrass others. And the boy in Tsing-yi, who had the same surname as the young hermit, had drunk wine and kept sending himself out, with a guilty expression on his face that was not quite like the sincere words that the monks on the mountain would say. Brother Huang, sorry, it's really not going to happen. If we got to know each other sooner, if I don't say anything else, it'll just be what you say. It's not too big for the official hat of the sky, and the official hat for the small one is not too small. They're all friends. It's just a trivial matter for you, Brother Huang. But now, on our side of Luapa Mountain, they are all equivalent to the closure of the mountain. It is not a joke. After all, this is something my master said in person. You are not familiar with our Luapa Mountain. You may not know. I was the first to go up the mountain, and it was the least that I did not help the master at all. If I cause trouble to the master again, I will have troubles, I will lose face, and I will not be able to raise my head. Although Huang Tsong was wondering at the time why a dignified monk Yuan Ing would be the most unhelpful monk on that Luapa Mountain. Even the hilltop of the young hermit should not be the case. It was just that Huang Tsong was willing to believe it when he looked at the sad expression of the boy in Tsing-yi. And in the end, the boy in Tsing-yi, who seemed to remember something, suddenly laughed and patted his chest to make sure that next time I saw the master, I could help explain this situation. As long as the master is willing to nod his head, you don't dislike Brother Huang. This worship I will be it. Don't worry, Brother Huang, I've always been shameless on the master's side. As long as the master doesn't object, I can also help bring in a good friend named me, at least as a guest of the Mengliang country. It's not a problem. Of course Huang Tsong would not refuse this kindness. The other party may be some kind words after sobering up, or it may not be. After Huang Tsong walked out for a while, he looked back again, and the boy in Tsing-yi was still standing there, grinning, waving goodbye to himself, and finally flicking his two sleeves and walking inside the door. In fact, in the depths of the emperor's heart on the side of Luapa Mountain, Huang Tsong wants to meet the person most, except for the young hermit who is definitely ranked first, followed by a female master. As long as he can see them, Huang Tsong cannot talk about worshipping or visiting the Qing at all. Qin Ping did not cheat Qing Tong. In fact, Lu Chen's Yin god, who had recreated a dreamland, was in that grotto at this moment. Qin Pingon, who was wearing a green shirt stood on the edge of the rock wall with Master Lu, who was wearing a lotus crown. Lu Chen could touch the top of the grotto as soon as he raised his hand. In the land of the abbot, the Taoist pure son who made the golden pill at the beginning did not seem to have left any traces, only an old futon which was woven from the simplest grass. Lu Chen walked around the futon keeping one hand against the wall and then stopped and said, "Pan Dao can't see how strange this futon is." Qin Pingon has been standing in place with his arms folded and asked, "Since Lu Zhu has not imposed any restrictions on landscapes, you said that for so many years, no one in the vicinity of woodsmen and herb gatherers has entered this place?" Lu Chen shook his head and said, "Probably not." Qin Pingon turned around and leaned against the stone wall. "That kid?" Lu Chen sat down on the futon cross-legged, palms facing up, pinching with 2 fingers and smiling. "I just gave the child away to go. I won't be superfluous. Qijin is the most careful in doing things. This child is placed on the Kawaguan side, and will neither pull out the seedlings to encourage growth, nor violent things. By the way, the child's name is Yelong, the arrogant Yelong Lang." Qin Pingon wondered, "That kid really has the qualifications to practice?" Lu Chen shook his head and said, "Strictly speaking, it is not suitable to practice. Even if you smash your head at the gate of the Huangliang school, you will not be able to go up to the mountain or become a god. But this child has wisdom roots, and the aptitude for cultivation is visible to the naked eye. Things are said to be useful, and useless is useless. For example, whether it is in the Qingming world or the vast world, many unknown monks in the temples are not necessarily better than those in terms of the difficulty of the Dharma. There is a Buddhist monk with the status of a monk in the upper 5 realms. But if he can't practice, he can't practice. Fortunately, it doesn't delay their practice of Buddhism." Qin Pingon asked, "That kid, can you catch the opportunity you gave?" Lu Chen smiled and nodded. "Then you haven't seen his talisman on the ground. It's not tacky. It's a pity that it's just a god, but it's just a loft in the sky. So if you haven't met you and me, his life situation, the situation is similar to the monks I mentioned." Qin Pingon turned his head and looked at Lu Chen sitting on the futon meditating and said solemnly, "The Jianghu romance and Jiguai novels have so many bridges. One is being chased by an enemy falling off a cliff. This place is a bit like it. And then inadvertently meet the withered bones of the expert or the remains of the immortal. If you don't say anything, knock a few heads first, maybe you can trigger some kind of agency restriction and get a martial arts secret book that can be invincible in the world. You might as well give it a try anyway. Here is the 2 of us, not ashamed." Lu Chen nodded as if pounding garlic. Yes, that boy Jiang Yunxing likes to read these miscellaneous books, and he is watching the door in the Daoist mountain, and he will be the city lord as usual." Qin Pingon has a deep memory of that little Taoist boy. He reads books every time he sees him and asks, "Is he become the city lord of Xianxia city or Verdant city?" Lu Chen smiled and said, "It's the city lord of the Verdant city who is an exceptional promotion, and is not the lord of the Baiyujing city who is not a monk in the ascended realm. It is rare in history. Of course it is because of Lu Chen's meager efforts, but at the same time Jiang Yunxing needs to face a life and death catastrophe. That is a real test. If he survives, he will be the righteous Verdant city lord rather than being treated. It's just a janitor who has the title of city lord. If it doesn't happen, let's talk about it in the next life." Because when Lu Chen returned to Baiyujing from Tianweishan, he detained a mustard seed-sized Waoweishan demon, and then threw it into Jiang Yunsheng's Dao heart in front of his senior brother Yudo. Mastering the stick but aiming for the yard. Lu Chen smiled and said, "Is it possible to remove another dream?" Qin Ping's placement is deaf. Lu Chen sighed because in that LV Gong temple site, a dream has just evolved. At the moment Lu Xing, the girl Peony Charm, the mountain and the wild cultivators, the 2 great immortals, still talking to themselves over there. Qin Pingon seemed to have never appeared before, and that Lu Xing did not see through the identity of the girl Peony, and continued to drink at the same table with Lu Xing. The 2 sides in the courtyard who were no longer fighting were still waiting to hear. Qin Pingon said, "It won't last long anyway, it will dissipate on its own. It's like a stroke dipped in thick ink and made in cursive script at one go. No matter how many words there are, The ink on the paper will always become paler. Lu Chen stopped struggling with such trivial matters and sighed for no reason. Is there a hermit in the world? Qin Pingon didn't even think of talking. Seeing that Lu Chen showed no signs of getting up, he simply sat on the edge of the grotto, hanging his feet outside the cliff, quietly looking into the distance. Qin Pingon, you said that if the era of the end of the Dharma really comes, will the people at that time entangle and quarrel? A question, whether there are people in the world who are cultivating the Tao? Lu Chen asked and replied, the big question. It seems that as long as there is one, it will do. We seem to be accustomed to thunder and rain, sweating in the sun, birth, old age, sickness and death under the mountain, and withered vegetation between heaven and earth. Qin Pingon, do you think we are acquiesced to be a matter of heaven and earth justice? This is collectively called the context of causality. Who can be responsible for this context? If life is a debt and debt repayment, then as the guarantor of the intermediary, who is it and what kind of existence is it? I once asked this question. The senior brother answered the wrong question and told me that it was just a small question. I just asked, in the eyes of senior brother, what is the real big problem? Senior brother smiled and replied, saying that if the whole world is regarded as one, then can my generation of cultivators have the magical powers to increase or decrease this seemingly unchanging 1 by 1 cent? Text. Still doesn't seem to be counted. Time is long? It seems even less than enough. Qin Pingon, what do you think? Qin Pingon finally spoke. I don't think anything. I just think that dreams can barely be counted as one kind because in your opinion the imaginer, one of the 12 high gods, may not really be at the end of the road. Otherwise it is one of the 6 highest, not the 5 highest. Lu Chen sighed. I am so sad. Qin Pingon asked, you seem to be afraid of the Buddha? Back then I thought I had completely broken the text barrier, so I took a trip to the Western Buddhist country. Lu Chen didn't hide anything. The Buddha used to interpret my dreams for me. In that realm of dream interpretation, the Buddha completely blurred the boundaries between Sumeru mustard and eternal moment. I couldn't even calculate that place. The years in the dreamland, how long have passed? Tens of millions of years. Hundreds of millions of years. All kinds of births, all kinds of deaths, countless changes of identities, countless postures, unpredictable, true and false. Qin Pingon smiled and said, there is immortal skill close to one's body which is called daring. After learning the immortal method, you are not afraid to travel all over the world. Sounds familiar. The first sentence is the wording in the previous dream, and the latter sentence seems to be the mantra of Sun Daochang. Lu Chen stood up, bent over again, and was about to take the unrecognizable futon to the sheep. Qin Pingon said, don't take it, just stay where it is. Lu Chen looked sad, so he had to gently put the futon back on the spot. Pretending to pat the dust, suddenly became a little curious and asked, the story in your dreamland, the content of the poor way, where has it developed? Qin Pingon said, I lost my realm inexplicably. I was slapped and slapped while being scolded by the girl and my face was swollen. I was still saying that poverty is really by you jingless master teacher, yelling that the sun and the moon can be learned from heaven and earth. Conscience. Lu Chen said distressedly, so miserable? Qin Pingon smiled and said, otherwise you think? Lu Chen rubbed his hands and said, since the poor Dao has been scolded, is there a hug? Even if you don't have a hug, you always touch the girl's face and little hands? Qin Pingon said, you slapped your face, do you count you touching the girl's hand with your face? Lu Chen said, hey, this crooked reason, I like it poorly. Qin Pingon started to swallow clouds and fog when he drew out a stick of dry smoke and became familiar with the road. After a great war for Haoran-Juzhou, it seemed like a test of people's minds. Just talking about the mountains and rivers of the Aquarius Island is a change of customs and customs, like a reborn person. Lu Chen came to Qin Pingon and sat down and asked casually, before you went to Qingming World, except for the tour with Lu Jinglong, you also practiced and then practiced. Have you continued to practice? Qin Pingon shook his head and said, of course not. After the tour I will be a teacher in Huang Tingwo's village school. I will also write a mountain and water travel note for Xiaomi Li. Now Qin Pingon is compiling a landscape travel note by himself, writing about a young ranger who walks across the rivers and lakes. In that dumb lake he met a hidden big water monster and actively invited the other party to travel together, and soon fought side by side. To meet the enemy's ancestor of Huangsha who was in trouble together, the two sides battled wits and courage, surrounded by dangers and finally won. Afterwards, the the dumb lake monster realized that the ranger was the young mountain owner who had sleepwalked on the mountain. It's called fate, so I made suggestions for the ranger all the way as the think tank and military advisor, wading through the mountains and rivers together, invincible. The monsters are afraid, especially when they often fight poems with people, and they have never failed. Qin Pingan said for no reason, it's hard for you to talk to Xiao Mo. The donkey is a vassal of the horse, but the word household is added. Lu Qin shook his sleeves and said with a hippie smile, isn't my heart open and the road narrow? I really fell in love with Xiao Mo. After knowing that the donkey is the vassal of the horse, there is another sentence that no one can take seriously, but Lu Xin can't ignore it. Spiders are the enemy of butterflies. The 7 things of Lu Chen's heart are the wooden chicken, the chrysanthemum tree, the mole, the kuanping, the cardinal, the snail, and the butterfly. Lu Chen turned his head and glanced at Qin Pingan. Inside the wooden door of Qin Pingan's home there is a peach tree. I just don't know whether Taoye can see peach blossoms after today, and it's another new year. Qin Pingan then casually chatted about his future monastic career. When the place of happiness comes in the middle of winter when the snow is heavy, take a small boat, boil wine on the stove and enjoy the snow in the middle of the lake. In heavy rain, wearing a hat on the banks of the river, watch a big water change as a dragon and a snake. One day when martial arts broke through, I would have an appointment with Chao Ci on the sea. I heard that the plum blossoms in Jiui Mountain this year are particularly moving, so I went to see it. Lu Chen smiled and said, I'm just observing, I have to be fascinated. Sort of coming. Chapter 940. When Lu Shan Zhu Shirtang got the paper kite letter, Feijian immediately sent the letter to the pavilion. The sword light flashed, his pillow frowned slightly, his fingers were brought together and he caught the flying sword. After reading the secret message he was shocked, stunned and rejoiced. After that his face was filled with an uncontrollable smile. Huang Tsong didn't ask anything. This time it was the turn to sit back and hesitate, and smiled. Your Majesty waits for a while. Can't wait for a certain news anyway. Your Majesty has nothing to lose. If you wait, it will be a return from our Huangliang faction. Coming out of the pavilion he walked away directly with Yu Jian. In the end, Gaozhen only shouted 2 old monks of the Huangliang sect. They fell together near the gate of the mountain. They walked down the steps, dozens of steps, and quickly walked past the archway of the mountain gate. The voice opened his mouth and said, the Huangliang faction sits back and pays respects to Lord Qin Shan. Qin Pingan clasped his fists and replied with courtesy, Luopashen. Qin Pingan has met the head of Gao. After a polite greeting, 2 groups of host and guest boarded Lu Shan together. Sit back, of course, will not neglect the other 3 distinguished guests brought by Qin Shanzhu. The cultivators who were able to visit the mountains with this young hermit would think with their knees, knowing that their identities are good and their Taoism is high. After that, Gao Zhen and Qin Pingan walked side by side, and the other 2 Huangliang sect elder monks were responsible for walking behind with the 3. For the genealogy monks in the martial arts sect, this kind of entertainment is a trivial matter of practice makes perfect. It will never be cold. However, it seems that they are all the young Taoist priests from Kuwaguan, who have been looking around asking questions, and there is no idleness in their mouths. It is strange that they will be cold. It's just those questions which are quite unpopular. For example, the Taoist priest wearing a fishtail crown would ask the ratio of the fairy on the mountain to the man practicing qi, but it should not be too young and in decay. Qin Pingan explained, Gao sect, this mountaineering visit is not within the established route of the previous trip. In short, it is a relatively accidental thing. And I can only stay in the mountains for a while and I will need it soon. Go down the mountain and continue on the road. He smiled and said, as long as Lord Qin Shan can come and sit for a while, it's fortunate. Qin Pingan asked with a smile, is Master Zhou Xian now on the mountain? Pillow shook his head and said, Uncle Lu and Uncle Song will come back a few days later. On the Yidefeng side, Lu Hongwen divided up from the Huangliang school. In addition to taking away a group of direct disciples, there was only one younger brother named Song who was willing to walk with Lu Hongwen, even the child of Uncle Lu who was Lu Runyan. Neither of his parents moved to Yidefeng, but chose to stay in Lushan to practice. One can imagine the popularity of Lu Hongwen in the Huangliang school in his early years. It's not that Uncle Liu's character is bad, it's just that bad temper which really makes people unbearable. Whenever the patriarch's church is in discussion, Uncle Lu will always turn over the old yellow calendar and talk about the old tunes. Let's take a look at Lu Shan. the dozens of hills where the opening ceremony was held in the past. I really don't know how the spirits of the ancestors above will feel. Qin Pingon laughed softly. Master Lu has a long history of antiquity. Perhaps in certain things, certain outspoken words will inevitably make it difficult for you to accept when going up the mountain. The more you can't talk about right or wrong, the more it's not clear. Of course, I'm just an outsider. I'm here to say a few words about my personal perception of standing and talking. But I believe that the future monks of the Huangliang school, especially the younger generation, will look back at the disputes and seriousness of the past. Then it will be regarded as a precious past experience. He nodded and nodded. If you have the intention to look back, the old people are not taboo, the young people are not repulsive and can accommodate many different people. If we say different things, it proves that our Huangliang school is true. Is different from before. Qin Pingon said, that's the truth. Confidently said, it's hard to come by, so cherish it. Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. Qing Tong always feels that there are a few differences. Why are you two still talking about the truth? Lu Qin hugged the back of his head with both hands and laughed in his heart. You fellow Daoists, don't you understand? This is called telling a lie to a real person. You don't need to be polite with heroes. It is also a golden alchemist. Is he a sword repairer, and his perception of the sword spirit Great Wall is different. With a slightly guilty look on the pillow, he used his heartfelt words and changed his name. I am not afraid of the jokes of the hermit, even if I put aside my identity as the head. I want to go to the Great Wall of Jianxi to pass the sword to kill the demon. At most it is a thought in my heart. Thinking I would never dare to go down the mountain for a long journey, cross the hanging mountain, pass through the private houses of the sword Immortal, and then climb the top of the city. It is really just hiding on the mountain, and I can only think about it. So this time the Huangliang faction and I sit up together. We were cheeky before and dare to invite the hermit to attend the ceremony. This is really offensive. I sit back and relax as a swordsman, and it is even more embarrassing. Qin Pingon shook his head and said, scholars stand up as holy and sages, and those who shed their hearts to become Buddhas and ancestors. The way to go is the upper level, only the middle. Always first-class minds can have second-class people and third-class things. You and I are no exceptions. No need to be too guilty for the high head. Qin Pingon turned his head and smiled. Where is the Great Wall of Sword Qi in life? There is an injustice of sword cultivation. I think it is the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Sit back, what do you think? Pillow nodded and said, I think so. Although he was called by his first name, Gaoxing did not feel any discomfort. Because I heard that in the land where sword repair is like a cloud, it has been custom and always like this since ancient times. It is rarely the way to call others with the surname affixed to the sword Immortal. Your Majesty Hermit, among the guests on the mountain, there is also our Emperor of Mengliang Kingdom. Your Majesty has admired Qin Shanzhu for a long time. If Qin Shanzhu finds it inappropriate to see him, I will not notify him at all. Qin Pingon said, to see Huang Tsong, even if it's not a coincidence today, I will visit the Emperor in the future. Sit back and feel surprised. Because the young hermit directly reported the name, it was obvious that he had already heard of the young Emperor of Mengliang Kingdom. There was a strange feeling in Qing Tong's heart, and he followed Qin Pingon to meet so many landscape gods, plus this Huangliang school. Carefully review all the words, expressions, eyes and actions of Qin Pingon and others. If there is a summary, it would be like a straight line. There are occasional ups and downs, such as mentioning his disciple Pei Qian with Yao Hihibo, chatting about his husband with Sui Shan, and chatting about the Great Wall of Sword Qi, pure sword repair. At the gate of the mountain, the man secretly tore off a page of paper and carefully carried it into his arms. The nun, who grew up with a childhood sweetheart, also pretended not to see it. It's just the old monk who is the real concierge of the Huangliang faction, hurriedly rushing from a peak to the wind, opened the book and turned over, stretched out his hand and said with a smile, get it, hurry up. The man monk said pitifully, Uncle Do, it's just a page with a few words on it. What to care about with me? The old monk took the book in his hand and stared. These pages, but you have to invite them to the secret library archives room. You must keep the important items in the secret library. You could also dare to keep them private? Believe it or not, Fan Zhonglu will follow up afterwards. Get up and find that you have missed this page, and you will directly record your big mistake at the Patriarch Hall. How old is it? There is no seriousness. I am not sensible. The young man had to take out the piece of paper again from his arms, and the old monk put it in his sleeve in a thunderous manner, and then reminded the two younger generations that Qin Shanzhu came to Lushan, so please don't disclose it for the time being. After the sentence, the old monk hurriedly went to discuss the matter with Fan Zhonglu. Just a few pieces of paper, Fan Zhonglu. As long as you are willing to open your eyes and close your eyes, I will be responsible for the next drink. Gao Zhen led Qin Pingon to the gate of a house in Lushan, and then talked to the young hermit about Huang Tsong's residence, and then took the other two Huangliang patriarchs to leave. It was a surprise if I didn't plan to inform the young emperor in advance. What's more, I didn't contribute any more, and this kind of favor that seemed to be given in vain was not for nothing. In the courtyard, Li Huai was talking to Guizhuzhou, repeatedly explaining that he had invited Qin Pingon a few times before. He had made mistakes. There was no magical powers in his own life. Pei Qian exaggerated it, but at the door, a group of people appeared next to him. Guizhuzhou was full of surprise and gave Li Huai a thumbs up. Guizhuzhou rushed to the blue shirt, smiling brightly, and said, "Master." Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. "I will come to see you by chance, and I will return to Tongyi's house soon." Guizhuzhou asked, "How fast?" Qin Pingon thought for a while and said, "At least 2/4 of an hour in Lushan. It's not that the master doesn't want to stay long, but that there are still important things waiting to be dealt with in Tongyi's house." Guizhuzhou palmed his hand with a boxing, "What question?" Qin Pingon explained to Guizhuzhou the three people around him, and I Fuzi from the blessed land of the Tongyi's Hao Cloud Grottos. As for the identity of the Xindu mountain guest Qing compiled by Qing Tong at the mountain gate, I am the lord of the supreme sect. Did not agree. Li Huai was a little unsure and asked tentatively, "Dao Master Lu? If you read it right, it's the one who set up a fortune-telling stall in your hometown. It's quite effective." Qin Lingjun swallowed and moved little by little, thinking silently that I can't see me, hiding behind Guizhuzhou. Lu Qin looked at this young man in a Confucian shirt that was also quite speechless. In those days wore open pants and wandered around. The aureole which Lu Qin used to measure the amount of cultural luck was almost really just a little too close to be picked up by this little bunny. The problem is that Li Huai is indeed a mere mortal with naked eyes. Li Huai smiled and said, "Dao Master Lu, after so many years he is still very young, I guess. Dao Chong Lu must be a cultivator." Lu Qin smiled stiffly. "It's easy to talk. I still don't know anything anyway. This kid doesn't seem to know anything. No way, that old man Yang really treated this guy as a grandson, and he was the kind of family that was especially intergenerational." The Taoist Nin could see a bit of depth. This guy who Qin Pingon said was a Taoist priest of the divine sect, it was not simple. The weather of the golden core monk must be blind to the eye. Lu Qin came to Qin Lingjun's side and said with a smile, "Generally people who are descended from the river walk the river to transform into the flood, but you walk along a large river, are you hard?" Qin Lingjun ran away but was held by Lu Qin on his shoulders. Qin Lingjun shouted, "Master, help me." Qin Pingon laughed softly, "It's okay, I'm here." Only then did Qin Lingjun stand still, sniffing his nose, drooping, dull and silent. Taoist Nin glanced at the fishtail crown on the other side's head, and asked with a heartfelt smile, "Dao Chong Lu is from the God sect?" Lu Qin smiled and said, "Of course it can be counted." Taoist Nin said with a smile, "Then one day I want to be a guest of the gods. Will Dao Master Lu help introduce him to Qi Tianjun? A few good words?" God sect? The hill is headed. Tianjun Qizhen, as the suzerain, is just a junior on the mountain who has been among the immortals for a few years, so the Qiu Taoist priest in front of him is just a jade pu. The only thing that can be spoken out is that Qizhen's Dao lineage and then climbs up relatives, is by Yujing's second son. It was the Tong Yezhou female cultivator who was named Qing Tong. Her realm was not low. She was either an immortal who was proficient in concealing qi, or she was in the ascendant realm. Lu Qin laughed loudly and said, "It's a trivial matter, a poor view of the dignity. Although it is incense every time the urn ceremony, the trail is able to see Qi Tianjun." Taoist Tender squinted his eyes and smiled. "This is good to dare to love. Tie, the little Taoist is here to pretend to be a ghost with me. What about mystery? Think you wear a fishtail crown as your second son? He really invincible? If you have the chance you can learn something, but of course you have to wait for yourself to be among the 14th realms." Qin Lingjun tilted his shoulders and wanted to apply oil to the soles of his feet. Lu Chen's palm fell a little along with him. "Just don't even want to run anyway." Lu Chen turned his head and smiled. "Daoist Jingqing, I haven't seen him for a few days. How come I have disagreed with Pin Dao like this? There is no smiling face. Qin Lingjun, who was tense, raised his head and forced a smile at the Baiyu Jinglu head teacher. A big man can bend and stretch only 2/4 of an hour. Besides, my master is right next to him. Zhang teaches you not to cross me. Give me a lighter hand movement, try it harder? Uncle Qin, I just lay on the ground and rolled howling to you. Lu Qin squinted and said, Friend Jingqing, don't you forget that we have a clear understanding of each other? Your heartfelt voice fell in the ears of the poor like thunder. Qin Lingjun tremblingly raised his hand, wiped the sweat on his face indiscriminately, tried his best to open his voice and said sternly, Master Lu, there must be a limit to bullying. You always scare me like this and I do too. A temperament. Thinking that his voice was like thunder, it was actually buzzing with mosquitoes and flies. Lu Qin said with a look of horror, How bad is your temper? Lu Qin slowly raised that hand. There was indeed a vibrating mountain and river in the palm of the third head teacher of Baiyujing. Not to mention Qin Lingjun's series of rhetoric and fairy deeds on the side of the Sanjiao patriarch, but only on the side of the old Guanzhou, who has not been known for forgiving others but not forgiving people for thousands of years. It's really a miracle. In a picture of a long river of blurred time, the boy in Xingyi stood on tiptoe, patted a horn and said that there was enough grass on the mountain. If this is the ascended realm cultivator of the Qingtong group, it is estimated that he will have been reincarnated by this time. Later, seeing the green bull turned his head, the boy in Xingyi was relieved and finally came another sentence. As soon as he heard of eating, his comprehension came. It is estimated that if you change to the ascension realm of Daoist Nin, you can also follow Qingtong and you can be a good company on Huangquan Road. Among the 14th realm monks by killing power, the monk's cleanliness, that is, the chicken soup monk's defense, are recognized as the first. But the old blind man of Shirwan Dashan and the old master of the Taoist temple of the East China Sea, both offensive and defensive matters, are only less prominent than Bei and Shenqing. In the eyes of Sun Huaizhong of Xiandu Guan, the patriarch of the three sects, together with the little master, the second son of Taoism, and Baizai plus these four, can make up the second group of 10 tycoons in the world in thousands of years. Guizhuzhou smiled and said nothing. Qin Pingon asked, What's wrong? Guizhuzhou said with a smile, Master, I don't know what's going on. The more you think, the less you talk. It's also strange. Qin Pingon nodded sternly and said, Very well, follow master. Qingtong has never seen a young hidden official with such gentle eyes. Li Huai suddenly said, Qin Pingon, discuss something with you. Qin Pingon smiled and nodded and followed Li Huai into the house. The Taoist Nin, who was at the door, was more nervous than Li Huai. After standing for a while, Taoist Nin thought it was more comfortable to sit down. Just like an awe-inspiring minister of bones and bones, however, he encountered a faint king who was unable to display his ambitions. Fortunately, he was appointed by the faint king as the minister of life. He went to the underground residence and carefully assisted His Royal Highness. Then one day the old emperor assumed a posture of trusting the loneliness, saying that he would hand over all the treasures of the treasury to His Royal Highness, just like fighting open the skylight to speak bright words, and you will be responsible for supervising the country in the future. And this prince at such a critical moment was shocked. It's almost like that the slight discrepancies can be ignored. How can the Nin Taoist sitting on the threshold not be nervous? The truth in the world is nothing more than a word of peace. Those good things that others can't ask for, son, Uncle Li Huai, little ancestor Li Huai, please settle down first. So many golden armored warriors who don't care about life and death, plus some poor worms who have become ghosts and then imprisoned in the golden armored warrior's belly cage, once they all recognize Li Huai as their master. If it was in that damaging Tongyi's Hao, as long as there was no one of the 14th realms blocking the way, it would be enough to sweep a continent. Li Huai has never had any taboos on Qin Pingan's side. Qin Pingan couldn't know who he was anyway. Before the old blind man was in the wild world, he forcibly dragged Li Huai and Taoist Nin into their dreams and returned to the great mountain. As a result, on the mountain top, a huge that had never been seen before appeared. Even if the opponent was kneeling on one knee, the head could be level with the mountain top. Almost not scared Li Huai to leave the dream directly. At that time the old blind man helped stabilize Dao's heart, and Li Huai did not withdraw from the dream. The Taoist Nin of course recognized Li Huai very much, courage but kind-hearted, not a seed of reading, but he can always come to light, and a few excellent truths popped out of his mouth. As for the old blind man's treatment of Li Huai, how he really thinks it is, anyway, it is all pleasing to the eye. It needs to be known that Li Huai is on the side of the old blind man. He is both a big disciple of the open mountain and a closed disciple. Qin Pingon listened patiently to Li Huai's words and said softly, "Do you have two concerns?" Li Huai smiled, scratching his head. "You still know me best." Taoist Nim was quite curious. He originally thought that Li Huai was afraid of taking responsibility, so he used a dragging trick on the old blind man's side. Qin Pingon thought for a moment and said slowly, "I think you won't accept the gift for the time being. There is no problem." Li Huai's worries are divided into two types. One is that he is worried about his badness. With thin arms and legs, the title of a Confucian sage has made Li Huai tremble. One more thing is what really makes Li Huai afraid to face. "I'm afraid that most of the old blind man of the master, like an old man in his hometown, left everything behind and then left one day without saying hello." Li Huai said softly, "But I'm a Confucian boy or Mr. Chi's student anyway, so I can definitely do something because I'm timid and keep hiding. Is it fair to say?" Qin Pingon smiled and said nothing. Li Huai asked, "Qin Pingon, how long is this temporary you said?" Qin Pingon opened the mouth and said, "Wait until you feel that you are not afraid anymore. If you make up your mind, you can." Li Huai asked, "Then if even the battle in the wild world is over, am I still unsure?" Qin Pingon did not answer this question directly and asked with a smile, "Then I also have two ways of saying one is nice and the other is ugly. Do you want to listen?" Li Huai's eyes lit up. "It's hard to hear first." Qin Pingon said, "From the first day when you entered the school, Mr. Chi just hoped that you could study hard. The content of the book can be memorized and forgotten and memorized, but the word effort will not be lost and grow up. In the future, it is enough to know the book well, be a serious scholar who can read and read, can write spring festival couplets and keep accounts, so that your parents feel bright on their faces. Mr. Chi never thought of you, Li Huai. Be a big person in the general sense, and since the first day I met you I have known how you are. To be honest, even now I don't think I can talk to little Aquarius Lin Shou in reading. When they compare." Qin Pingon still has nothing to say. The old man in the backyard of the Yang family drugstore also only hopes that your life in Li Huai will be safe and stable. And this request from the drugstore old man Yang doesn't need to be said, so Mr. Chi knows it and Qin Pingon understands it too. In addition, the battle that took place between the two worlds was so strange that clouds and waves appeared endlessly. Once Li Huai jumped into the battlefield, he would be in it with the mind and methods of Jiaxin and clogs. Take out the chess pieces that are equivalent to Li Huai, and go to. Change the pieces. Li Huai also has a simple temperament and good-natured personality. If he is not careful, his mood will collapse. Even if he is fine, how can the old blind man not let Li Huai die on the battlefield? His heart? Qin Pingon has a deep understanding of the difficulty of remedying the human heart. Just a small example. On a certain battlefield, the golden armored warriors who left the 100,000 mountains mightily gather into an army. Even if the barren world is defeated on that battlefield, the wild army only needs to use a few means to let the golden armored warriors, inadvertently wounding dozens of Howren monks or hundreds of thousands of Howren soldiers. I am afraid that Li Huai will feel guilty and uneasy in this life, and even wake up from nightmares countless times in his life. After a battle is over and can't survive, the golden armored men under Li Huai's are just like the books on the bookshelves in the house today. However, the whole world has high hopes for Li Huai. You are a sage of Xianxia Academy, a disciple of Qi Jingchun and a disciple of Wensheng's lineage. You have such a key force of horror, why don't you want it? Join the battlefield? Even if Li Huai survived this difficult heart, she began to force herself to accept certain truths on the battlefield, and had to do things that departed from the books of sages and sages. Taking control of the army and eventually continuing to lead the Golden Armor Army all the way south, then Li Huai's future life will be like turning into another road. He may mature and become better because of this, and may even become a veritable gentleman of the academy, but more it may be a long time hard to let go, and I will live in guilt all my life. It seems that the truth is known, but I don't let myself go. But these words, this truth, Qin Pingon also, temporarily, didn't want to break with Li Huai and opened up. On the road of life, sometimes accept a very weighty truth, no matter how good the truth is. It is a big rock added to the backpack of a mountaineer. Can make people stagger, overwhelmed and miserable. Li Huai wondered, This is already ugly? Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's nice that you, Li Huai, are a disciple of our Wunxing lineage. It's very simple, from your master Wunxing to your mentor Mr. Qi and then to the master Bo Chui Yang, around the second uncle, the third uncle Lu Shirley and the young uncle Qin Pingon. We didn't contribute much in the previous battle that swept the two worlds, right? You are not less at all." Li Huai's face was stunned and then dulled. "It's not as bad as it sounds." The Taoist Nen at the door was immediately unhappy. "Your surname is Qin, why is it so bad? When my tender Taoist does not exist, do you dare to bully my son so blatantly? When we both make our way out of the road, if we have the ability, we will put aside our respective backers, and then get rid of some vacant identities, and afterwards, no one is allowed to hold grudges, practice hands and learn from each other." Qin Pingon continued, "Li Huai, believe in yourself. Outside the battlefield you can do many things in the future. You can do academic studies and other things. Maybe some of these things, most of them, can be done by others. But there will always be something that Li Huai can really do. Whether it is as a child of Confucianism or living in the world, you still have to have this confidence." Li Huai looked up. "I don't believe in myself, but I believe in you." Qin Pingon smiled and clapped his hands. "This is not enough." Li Huai remembered something, picked up the book on the table and asked casually, "Qin Pingan, do you know Lu Yen who wrote this book?" Qin Pingon smiled and nodded and said, "Not only do I know, but I have also seen this Lu Zhu. The Taoist name is Chunyang and he is a very knowledgeable man who has a high level of truth. Like Mr. Qi, he is in the integration of the three religions. It's going very high and far along this road." Qin Pingon glanced at the bookshelf and determined the original location of the book. He couldn't help feeling that this could be turned out by Li Huai. Since the beginning of Huangliang country, someone added this book one day and put it on the bookshelf. There must be a lot of visitors in this house, and there may be few who have actually turned over this book. After all, miscellaneous books other than Taoist books are used as decorations in the mansion on the mountain. Taoist Nen began to panic. Because from the moment Qin Pingon walked into the house, Taoist Nen began to wait for God to worship the Buddha, and begged his son to never talk to Qin Pingon and mention this book in Na Lu Yen. If Qin Pingon and his party didn't climb the mountain, even if Li Huai didn't take this book, Taoist Nen would steal it away. Qin Pingon thought for a while and said, "Looking back, I will say hello to the head of Gao, and let the Huangliang faction give you this book?" Li Huai laughed and said, I don't understand it. I got a headache after turning half of it before, so it's better to stay here." In the courtyard outside the door, Lu Xian smiled with Qin Pingon with his heartfelt voice. Pan Dao finally figured out why the Taoist Chunyang didn't leave any marks on the grottos. In the sense, it is actually the book that Li Huai has in his hand. It just requires the readers to be sincere and sincerely approve of the content written in the book to have the effect of sincere feelings and resonance between heaven and earth. The two are in harmony with each other and the heart is intelligible, that is, the secret and the supreme mental method. Even on the 12th floor of the 5th city of Baiyujing, this is a kind of more mysterious dictation. It is hard to be pure Yang Dao back then. The talent is an earth immortal who has just formed a pill and he has this Dao Dharma attainments. If the poor Dao is not wrong, if Li Huai is willing to recite this book aloud several times, or repeat it silently in his heart, in a certain at this juncture, a vision will occur, and the text in the book will resemble an autumn soldier on the battlefield, rearranged and become a real swordsmanship tactic, pointing straight to the Jindan Avenue. Qin Pingon took the book and turned a few pages. The material of the pages is ordinary, and they are just the engraved editions of folk books. This means that even if this book can carry the true meaning of the sword art left by Lu Yen, the book itself can easily be destroyed in the natural and man-made disasters of various dynasties and generations. So he asked Lu Chen, "It can only be the book in the house?" Lu Chen shook his head and said, "It may not be true. Most of the Taoists of Chunyang have other arrangements. Otherwise they will only say that the Emperor's imperial Plakfeng Lei Palace Luzhu Temple is gone. If there is really only this book, Fen Shrine, as long as the library of the book building has to walk through the water once or suffer several battles, this inheritance will be completely cut off. With the means of the pure Yang Taoist, I think it will not be so desperate. But no matter what, this path is now in Li Huai." "Oh, it's in your hands, Qin Pingon." Lu Chen Tusk said in amazement. "With only 2 grains of rain money, I bought a Taoist book that directly refers to the golden core. This transaction is really profitable. If the top sect of China and Earth learns about this, don't talk about it. 2,000 Guyuqian are willing to nod. I'm afraid you will regret it, for 1,000 Guyuqian is negotiable, and 8,000 is not unreasonable. If it is an unowned thing, it must be snatched wildly and left in the Qingming world. I am afraid it's just a great chaos. I don't know how many of the upper 5 realms are going to fight for this, and how many immortals are going to fight with their brains, and they die for the 1,000-year plan of the sect's incense. This sword tactic left by the Taoist Chunyang is simply a secret book tailored for you on Xindu Mountain. There are thousands of secrets in the Taoist book of the world. Who dares to say that he points to the golden core? The key is the sword tactic. Qin Pingon and Li Huai laughed and said, "This book is of great significance. Because it involves the swordsmanship inheritance of that pure Sun Taoist. It is of great value. If you don't accept it, I will accept it. There is a line of swords and immortals in the world, and the Qingming Xuandu Temple is a well-deserved ancestor, but when it comes to Lu Yen, it has a new face and another peak. Li Huai's face doesn't matter, he can eat as much food as he holds in his hand, knowing how many caddies he has and how much strength he can use. This is Li Huai's consistent aim of being a person. This time it was Lu Chen's turn to be dumbfounded. Qin Pingon really accepted it? Don't go back to the old profession and become the good boy? The Taoist Nin was even more anxious, scorching his anger, and said in his heart, "My son, I can't give it to you. I can't bring it to the door by myself, but I am pushed out of the door with your hands. I can't use it, let alone the wild world. Every time you break your head you have to grab your hands. Even in the Howren world, who likes to be polite and rule-based, doesn't it also have the phrase, heaven's gift is not taken back by the blame? Young master, even if we want to give it to Qin Pingon. If you leave the original book, it's a big deal for the son to let Qin Pingon copy the book casually. There are a lot of people, wouldn't everyone be happy?" Li Huai shook his head and said, "What do you want to do so much?" The Taoist Nin was overwhelmed, but after holding back for a long time he smiled bitterly and shook his head and stopped persuading Li Huai. "My dear son, how come I, old and tender, put you on such an uncle who doesn't take chances as chances?" Qin Pingon took out 5 booklets from his sleeves and handed them to Li Huai with a smile. "The task is complete." It was Li Huai's previous difficulties in reading. He gave Qin Pingon 2 books at the Confucian Temple. After the Confucian Temple's discussions, Qin Pingon was always more attentive, and would often show them to meticulously solve puzzles, even as long as he had a different experience. Just add refills in the blank space, just like in the Wang Xinghua Hall of the Tonggishao Dequan dynasty. He once took out his pen and ink, and then in the Changchundongtian that was temporarily used as a dojo in Xiandushan, Qin Pingon, it's not easy to ask questions and it's even harder to answer questions. So Li Huai gave 2 books. When Qin Pingan returned today there were 5 in total. Moreover, the 3 books on Qin Ping's are all in teeny lower letters. And at the end of the last booklet, a large list of titles of various cited books were carefully marked. Li Huai took the booklet. "I'll read it carefully, so I'll look through it." Qin Pingon walked out of the house alone, and after crossing the threshold he found that Lu Qin had nothing to do and had already left for a stroll. "I heard before that there are more female cultivators from Huangliang's school, especially in Lushan, where the yin and the yang are about to be susceptible." The Taoist Nin, who had been sitting on the threshold, stood up and stood in the corridor outside the door with Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon said in his heart, "This book written by Lu Zhu will be given to Li Huai again before I go down the mountain, so that he can read it several times in his spare time. When you want to borrow it, ask Li Huai." Taoist Nin smiled and said, "It's easy to talk and talk. This trouble going round and round, isn't it a mischance?" Qin Pingon continued, "The old saying goes that you have a sharp blade and you have a murderous heart. This truth must not be taken carelessly. The Taoist Nin is in a good mood at the moment, so he is willing to perfuse this young hidden official. Otherwise I will break these empty words with me. Did you find the wrong person? My Tao Ting is not your Confucian child, nor is it the Howren monk, so I just said casually, the hermit is right, you deserve to be the son of a saint who has broken thousands of books." Qin Pingon didn't take it seriously. He just didn't hear the sarcasm in the Taoist nun's words and said to himself, "The old blind man arranged you next to Li Huai, just let you be responsible for protecting the road, so don't do that. Preaching things that are superfluous. If it weren't for whether to accept the golden armored warrior, you would be kind, but you have an eagerness in your heart. Didn't you how to sway Li Huai to agree to it? Otherwise, I will let you know what will happen if I dare to ruin the innocent heart of my Wenxing disciple, dare to disturb Li Huai's ordinary heart. Whether you believe it or not, as long as I feel that you have done something wrong in this matter, and take Li Huai on the wrong road based on personal preference, then don't blame me for not reminding you unless you Tao Ting can rush to me. Before I had fled all the way to 100,000 mountains, otherwise the old blind man would not be able to protect you. The Taoist Nin looked cloudy and uncertain and said nothing. I wanted to say something cruel, but the Taoist Nin restrained it after the words came to his lips a few times. In the end, I just feel the aggrieved Nin Taoist can only suffocate a strange saying that is lacking in confidence, and he did not dare to confront the young man directly in words. But today the calm but sharp-edged young hermit is still talking to himself over there. Take 10,000 steps and say, even if you escape to 100,000 mountains, the old blind man can protect you for a while but still can't protect you. A generation. The Taoist Nin looked at him from the corner of his eye, in a blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes, his hands in his sleeves, his back against the wall. Only then did I remember one thing. Calculated according to the cultural heritage of the Confucian temple, this guy really seems to be Li Huai's little uncle? That's it, when Xing's line of protection is known to the Taoist Nin and all the world knows it. The Taoist Nin definitely didn't want to go to personally learn to verify the truth of this matter. Besides, Qin Pingon is Li Huai's little uncle and I am Li Huai's protector. It is half of my family's relationship. I closed the door and said a few nasty things, Barrett. It's just that Taoist Nin always feels that he hasn't seen him for a few days, and the guy next to him seems to have changed a lot. Was it because of a trip to the wild hinterland in Natayue Mountain? More than that, it seems that the current trip has made this young hidden official on a certain path and gaining more. In an instant, the Taoist Nin saw the young hidden official and squinted his eyes suddenly. I was scared by a few big words from the younger generation. I only saw the head beheaded instead of the draft, right? The young hidden official moved, smiled and patted the Taoist Nin's shoulder. What's more, senior is not afraid of the shadow leaning. The Taoist Nin let out a dry smile. It seems more useless. This is considered to be given a date by the young hermit and knocked on a stick? Qin Pingon finally said, it's better to say ugly things first and it's better to be resentful in the future. If you complain in pairs, you will fight for life and death and feel that no one is wrong. Taoist Nin nodded, this truth is simple and superficial, it is more real. After Qin Pingon and Taoist Nin recounted the past, there was no Baiyu Jinglu as the head teacher. Qin Lingjun in the courtyard still cowered, with a restrained look and difficult to speak. So many people lost face on the ground and couldn't pick it up. Qin Pingon stepped down the steps and came to Qin Lingjun, like an unknown prophet, and smiled. Why, have you seen the emperor of the Mengliang kingdom? Come on, at the wine table I told Huang Tsong to boast about the sea. It is a promise that I am sure. Will he serve as the chief consecration of Mengliang country, the famous guest Qin? Qin Lingjun smiled and said awkwardly, that's too ignorant of the world. I can't, absolutely can't. Quickly winked at Guizhujiu, you are my master's little disciple speaking more effectively than me. Guizhujiu really kept his promise and helped out the siege. He roughly talked about the conversation between Qin Lingjun and the young emperor. Qin Pingon reached out and held Qin Lingjun's head. Qin Ling shrank his neck. Qin Pingon smiled and said, you can serve as the royal worship of Mengliang country, you can be named as for the chief title even if it is the genus of flood dragon. Once it is too deeply involved with Guizhua, it will be more troublesome in the future. In addition, Miyu, you discuss it with him. Miyu himself is willing to make multiple offerings or the status of a guest, but I won't stop it. In addition, the genealogical monk serves as a guest dedicated to the guest, but all those who are named will need to be recorded at the Patriarch Hall of Jiaisfeng. If you ask about it, just push it on me. Qin Lingjun suddenly raised his head and said in surprise, Master promised this matter? Qin Pingon nodded and said in a bad mood, brilliant. Qin Lingjun hugged his master's arm, tears of gratitude. When will the master go home? I will prepare the ingredients and let the old cook make a big table of delicious food. I knew this a long time ago. I saw the lonely Master Lu before. I was afraid of it. Uncle, I just jumped up and spit on your face. Qin Pingon held down the head, gently pushed it away and stared. Don't encourage Bai Xian to go to any night banquet in the future to suppress Wei Shanjun's limelight? You can't figure it out. Qin Lingjun gave a cry. Qin Pingon said, I don't need money for the gift for participating in the Piyun Mountain Night Tour banquet. Qin Lingjun suddenly realized, smiled brightly and said, it's still the master that counts as an all-out plan. Afterwards, Qin Pingon was going to visit Huang Tsong, the emperor of Mengliang Kingdom, and asked Guizhujiu if he wanted to be with him. Guizhujiu shook his head and couldn't say it. It seemed meaningless. Qin Lingjun straightened his chest and began to recommend himself, but the master did not agree. After Qin Pingon left and Lu Qin was no longer there, the boy in Xingyi threw his sleeves away, and began to wonder about the young fellow who wore a power fence. Qin Lingjun cautiously began to close. Friends of the fellow Daoist, if I guess correctly, you are starting in the Ascended Realm. Qing Tong took off the power fence. There was a slight surprise. This Yuaning Realm Waterbird's vision is so good? Regardless of the depth of the Ascended Realm's cultivation level and the level of lethality, Qing Tong is quite proud of the matter of hiding the weather, and he never wanted to be seen through by this boy in Xingyi. Seeing that the young fellow Daoist did not admit that he did not deny, Qin Lingjun knew it in his heart. He was a little bit complacent and looked at what is dripping water, that's it. Guessing the realm of that strange monk is actually the same as guessing the number as long as experience if it is rich enough, it is very simple. Qin Lingjun exchanged a few words with this young fellow who claimed to be from Tongyi's Hao. As if thinking of something, he ran out of the yard to find someone. Outside a house in Lushan, there are 2 ancient pines in front of the door, each with lingxiao flowers on it. The mountain breeze is soft, the flowers are as big as a bowl, and they fall slowly without separating from the branches. Lu Qin squatted under the tree and saw a flower falling to the ground. He still didn't want to get up, as if to wait until another flower fell. A group of passing female cultivators saw this scene and saw that the young Taoist priest was more handsome and more interesting. They had low eyebrows, squinted squints and laughed. Lu Qin stood up and made a call with those sisters and sisters. Just as they were about to sign up for their own account, they still had things to do, but they only repaid the courtesies a little and then they left. After that, Lu Qin continued to wander all the way, thinking about the idleness in the market. When the boy in Xingyi finally saw the figure of Master Lu from a distance, he saw the young Taoist priest squatting on the side of the road, pointing his finger at a stone on the ground, cursing, "When people eat hot meals, dogs have to eat hot shit. You, that's good, it's delicious and lazy. I like to provoke right and wrong and be the stumbling block, right? It annoys me not hitting you, hitting the dog." Qin Lingjun took the courage and walked towards that Lu Qin, then squatted aside without speaking. Lu Qin turned his head and smiled and asked, "What are you doing?" Qin Lingjun took a deep breath with firm eyes and said, "Teacher Lu, don't involve my master and Luopashen in our affairs, okay?" Lu Qin smiled and said, "It's weird, what's the matter with us?" When Qin Lingjun said these words, it seemed that he had run out of courage. "Let me take a moment to say a few more words in my heart and then reason with you." Lu Qin smiled and said, "Stop spitting on my face?" Qin Lingjun's eyes turned sharply and he had to find a way to make up for it. Lu Qin said, "I heard that Daoist Jingqing is on the side of Luopa Mountain, and he has newly recognized a nephew whose surname is Zheng." Qin Lingjun said in embarrassment, "Nothing." Before the gate of his mountain, a surnamed Zheng came and he looked like a scholar with a little money. At the beginning he claimed to be the apprentice of his brother Qin Zhuoyo, so Qin Lingjun didn't take it too seriously. Only later, when I saw Master Wen Xing and De Baigo were very polite on the side of the scholar surnamed Zheng. Even De Baigo was rarely eaten up by an outsider, and Qin Lingjun immediately realized that something was wrong. After thinking about it, I only felt that the surname Zheng anyway was not the demon giant of Baidi City, then everything was easy to discuss. The Taoist Nin just doesn't know your series of great achievements, otherwise he will be willing to fall for the wind. Lu Qin smiled and stood up, kicked off the stone, shot out like an arrow, passed between the branches of an ancient pine, and finally went off the cliff, stunned the geese in the sky, nodded and said, "Between the wooden geese, the change of dragon and snake." Qin Lingjun followed up and said softly, "I said that before, so I agreed as Master Lu?" After Lu Qin held his hands, he walked slowly and said, "It's not a bad thing, what are you afraid of? I walked away from Jiao Jiao, but I just entered the nascent soul realm and failed to become Yupu. Then what will you do next time? Tidu walked into the sea? How about becoming the Jade Pure realm? What about the Immortal realm? Senshin realm? Now there is a real dragon in the vast world. The person who slashes the dragon is in harmony, so he can afford the next one. It may not be able to accommodate two, but if you go to Qingming world there will be no other sight in the cave. I only need to give you a Baiyujing amulet." Qin Lingjun shook his head and said, "I don't want to leave home so far. Then Qin Lingjun asked the question that he hadn't understood for many years. Teacher Lu, you are so advanced in Taoism and your status is so prominent. Why do you compare this with me? In fact, Qin Lingjun asked his master privately, but Qin Pingan's answer was a more mountain statement, and it will finally come to light. It also made Qin Ling not think about it too much and it would come naturally. Now that the master said so, Qin Lingjun didn't really think about it. If it weren't for meeting Lu Qin today, Qin Lingjun would just think that he didn't have this kind of thing and he was thinking about the mysterious things. Competing with you. It's not counted. It's just an old account. I haven't been able to turn it over. If I don't delay my practice, it's just a concern. It's always going to be smoothed out. Lu Qin put his fingers together and knocked on the head of the boy in Xingyi. He smiled and said, "You can't learn a little bit from your master. Look at Qin Pingan. He has been traveling abroad all year round and he has broken the world in his cultivation. Who doesn't envy it when it goes up?" Qin Lingjun touched his head and did not look up. He walked with Lu Xun soundly saying, "But the master doesn't want to be away from home all the year round. He is not thinking of Mrs. Shanju and then he wants to help that Qi. Sir, look at the rivers and lakes more. You think the master does not want to be safe?" Lu Qin looked shocked and said, "Friend Jingqing, I used to be poor and clumsy. So you are not a fool?" When Qin Lingjun heard this and then thought of Guozujia's remarks from his master, his waist became hard and he shook his head. Of course he didn't dare to fly those 2 sleeves. Lu Qin suddenly kicked Qin Lingjun's ass. "Go away. When I want to travel to the Qingming world someday, I can come to Bai Yujing to find me." Qin Lingjun staggered, rubbed his butt and ran away without looking back. "Go to Bai Yujing to find you? I'm looking for you, uncle." Lu Qin smiled and said, "Huh." This memory was really eaten by the Taoist Nen. The boy in Xingyi didn't know his heart well, but he didn't dare to stop. His pace was faster and he ran out of sight in an instant. Qing Tong was so bored he went out to relax. For some reason, Qing Tong was stared a little by the little girl named Guozhujio before. The little girl didn't open her mouth to say anything, she just walked around and practiced boxing in a pretended way, but she had a blue eye from time to time. When Qing Tong went out, he saw the sweaty boy in Xingyi, brushing past himself and smashing into the door quickly. As a result, Qing Tong found that in a pavilion on the edge of a cliff, among Yingying and Yan, Master Lu was showing palmistry to a group of female practitioners. The young Taoist priest squeezed the palm of a woman with one hand and gently pointed at the palm of the woman with the other hand, and said something about the landscape and appearance of the palm pattern corresponding to the landscape, and then mixed with a few words of emotion, saying that since ancient times, but a woman such as my sister with such a good color and the talented person, always get together less, which means that the gold buyer will not meet the gold seller. In the end, I can only ask you Lao to open his eyes and be more pitiful. With marriage, I am afraid that I will be unsatisfied. In the end, I have a shadow. The country is beautiful and I am sad to teach others to look at it. Fortunately, it is good to see my sister's palmistry through the trail. The fortune is a little bit thinner, only to say this love road, but it is definitely going well. After that, the young Taoist priest who was particularly proficient in palmistry and facial expression changed the woman and continued to look at palmistry, and the female nuns from Lushan were all smiling. A girlish-looking young female cultivator withdrew her hand and asked curiously, "Dao Master Lu, I have also been to God's God sect with Master. Why haven't I heard of you, Kuwagwan?" The young Taoist priest said, "Little Taoist temple is a small Taoist temple. You have never heard of Sister Lin and it is normal. Every time the peaks are celebrated or the sects give the urn, the poor Taoist can be there. That is, the position is relatively backward, not conspicuous, so I must have missed Sister Lin." The girl nodded. "Probably so. I heard that there are dozens of large and small Taoist temples of the gods and gods, and the Taoist lineage is very complicated. The young Taoist priest is anxious. Why don't you ask who Feng Dao is climbing with today? It's a pity that they didn't look at the palmistry less and they still failed to ask about it. That's it, the matter is over, the poor road will not be hidden. Poor Dao must reveal his identity with you. But before that, let's talk a few words with a senior." On the other side of the courtyard, Taoist Nen had been using his hand to watch the mountains and rivers, watching the movements of the Taoist priest Lu Fu from a distance in his heart. When the young Taoist squatted on the side of the road and pointed at a stone over there, Taoist Nen stopped beating. "I have nothing to do with a young hermit and I am afraid that you are a Taoist priest who has a stern view of the gods? It's just that the Taoist Nin is very hot in the end and never made a sound. When he came to follow his son, he was very self-cultivating and nurturing. Moreover, the Taoist Nin also gave birth to a bit of guard. Could it be that his ancestor was far away in Baiyujing? The second little Taoist priest already aware of his prying? If this is the case, how could it be a fair land? But this person is destined not to be that Tianjun Qixin. Is it an old ancestor in the Godzong mountain who never shows his face? In this awe-inspiring world, everything is good, it is troublesome, and the slightest bit is not profitable. Talking about patrons, preaching, and patriarch. Lu Chen showed his sister's palmistry and smiled with a heartfelt voice. How long will seniors look at? Taoist Nin laughed and said, Dao Chonglu has a keen sense of mind and is quite good. Lu Chen sighed as if he was afraid that the other party would not notice his own thoughts, so he said his own thoughts, stomping his feet, and said, the trail is called a madness. One by one they bully the poor road and have a good temper, right? Forget it for Qin Pingon. After all, Pang Dao is a half-month-old who helped this guy with his own hands, but you, a tender Daoist, dare to be so unscrupulous, so unreasonable. For an instant, the heartstrings of the tender Taoist are tense. The next moment the Taoist Nin was sweating from his forehead. Standing in a white mist of heaven and earth and looking up, I saw a majestic place in the distance. Baiyujing. A young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown jumped down from the highest point of the Baiyujing. The mustard seed was suddenly as big as Mount Sum. The tender Taoist above. As soon as the Taoist Nin gritted his teeth, he was about to show his true body, and he fought against the three masters of Baiyujing Lu Chen. It's just that Lu Chen's face is no longer seen between the world and Baiyujing, but Taoist Nin doesn't move because at some point, Lu Chen shrunk into mustard seeds. At this moment he is standing on the shoulder of Taoist Nin as if looking over someone somewhere far away, relying on the sky with a long sword. A good Dao long and long road. Sword of Coming Chapter 941. In the pavilion the atmosphere is much more harmonious. As soon as I heard that the head of Lu Daoist who looked at him in the dark, he turned out to be a distinguished guest who climbed with Qin Shanzhu, and he was silent for a while. Of course I can't believe it, but no matter how incredible it is, I have to believe it. After all, who dares to fake this kind of thing? The original female sisters who were tired and lazy, one by one looked serious and looked at the young Taoist master. They became more and more handsome. The young Taoist priest is like a storyteller at the foot of the mountain. He began to reminisce about the past. Although Xiaodao and Qin Shanzhu are not from the same hometown, they are acquaintances in trouble when they met in the microtime. We met two teenagers. At that time the Trail and Qin Shanzhu were not successful, and then the Trail and Qin Shanzhu fell in love with each other, so they went out together for a long journey. I once stayed at a city temple overnight, sleepwalking to the rich and wealthy fortune division, and saw that purple the chief officer of fortune with the appearance of a judge with a jade belt and a jade belt. When a woman heard this, she couldn't help interrupting the young Taoist priest's speech and asked doubtfully, in the city god's office, is there such a place as the rich and wealthy department? There are many government offices such as the capital city god temple in the capital of Mengliang Kingdom, and the many county city temples with few yamen. It seems that there is no such division. The women in the pavilion shook their heads, apparently they had never heard of it. The young Taoist sighed, no, things are so weird. Anyway, I have seen a lot of weird things. For example, Cheng Huang's subordinates are holding a group of criminals. Cheng Huang is going to be tried at night. Among them is the woman with a rope hanging around her neck. Dressed in red with a miserable complexion, she habitually raised her head, sticking out her tongue slightly, and a woman wearing shackles walking in the corridor, like a row of water full of green silk floating like water, and then there are still 5 nobles. The sons of the aristocratic family with a large group of beautiful concubines and maids, came to see the chief officer of the Qinghuang temple for a drink. In the middle of the night, there was another woman in a white dress riding a white horse. She called herself Bai, who was practicing under the Qingqing mountain. The celestial beings come here to rest for a while. There are so many weird, dizzying eyes, and it's really 100 years of things in the world overnight. The trail wakes up afterwards, thinks about it, and then read some ancient books just like you are puzzled, so I dare not take it seriously. Fortunately, those who are raised on stones have a root stumbling. There are no relatives or 6 relatives. The trail is a coincidence. It is a relative of the Taoist priest of the superintendent of the Divine Envoy sect. Accepting disciples, but accepting disciples on behalf of the teacher. After that, even if the trail begins to formally practice as for Qin Shanzhu, the city's god's temple was rich and prosperous, and it was a great fortune. It is really like the dragon falling into the mire. Unbearable, mosquitoes and flies are full of scales, trapped in the cage, and finally one day the wind and rain are dull, just waiting for the thunderbolt. The mud dragon in the pond is full of spirits and it goes straight into the air. 2 flowers bloom, one on each side. The trail will not go into details about the many feats of Qin Shanzhu after that. Just say that when the trail has been cultivated into the fairy law, the mountain people live in secluded, quiet and extremely thinking, then they will start to travel down the mountain, experience in the red dust, meet the demons and descend the demons, see the sneaky and kill the sneaky. So happy, it is also considered to have won a big reputation in the rivers and lakes. I wandered all the way to a place of historical interest, separated by a big river and 2 mountains facing each other. Since ancient times there has been a saying that turtles and snakes lock the river. But guess what? Such a place with strong water transportation, but I just met one. In a severe drought that has not happened in hundreds of years, the people don't have a chance to live, and the trails have cultivated immortal skills, but they are still old-fashioned. Asking for an explanation, okay, I don't take the trails seriously at all. I just ate a closed door and the trails will endure. Then the lower reaches look for the Hujuan mansion on the old site of the Dragon Palace, and borrow water from the lake. So I went to the upper reaches of the riverbed, but still to no avail. But the trail was angry, so I had to go out in person and did not close my eyes for several days, just to study a fairy family talisman, about the heart of the innocent child, touch the gods and the earth. This road has a very high threshold. The big talisman, I really learned the little way: take a bath, change clothes fast, go to the high building by the river, burn the talisman paper into the wine, and then threw the wine glass out of the building after drinking only half a cup of wine on the trail. Pouring out like a waterfall, a steady stream of water pours into the dry riverbed, where there is a live fish. From then on, the river is turbulent and the vegetation is lush. The nuns in the pavilion looked at each other. Should we cheer a few times or should we question a few words? Dao Master Lu, although you are a cultivator of the middle 5 realm, you are the lowest level of the Dongfu realm after all. To say that the big talisman, the threshold is extremely high, is it a bit too much? It is important to know that at the moment in the pavilion, there is a Sevuing realm and 2 Dongfu realm trainers sitting. Qing Tong began to move to another place and didn't plan to continue to listen. The more Lu Zhangjiao talked, the more it became more meaningless. Others brag about not drafting, they are all boasting about themselves. Lu Qin is different, is it the opposite? When an old man in yellow came to the pavilion, Yingying and Yanyan had already dispersed. There was only one young Taoist priest wearing a fishtail crown. The hip flask, the one who helped to read and tell the story with the fairy before, took the saliva of a water tank, and had to drink a little wine to moisturize and refresh his throat. Lu Qin saw Taoist Nin stopping outside the pavilion, beckoning and smiling. Sit down and talk. Only then did Taoist Nin dare to step up the steps. In that illusion before, the 2 parties hadn't talked with each other, and Lu Qin quickly sent the Taoist Nin gift out of the country. Lu Qin asked, Senior Tao Ting didn't tell Li Huai about his poor status, right? Taoist Nin shook his head. Don't dare to branch out. First there was a reminder that the young hidden official was almost threatening, and then there was the beating of the head teacher of Baiyu Jinglu. At this time the tender Taoist was not confident and arrogant. Lu Qin smiled and said, Qin Pingon made those ruthless words with you, didn't he feel unhappy in his heart? Taoist Nin twitched his lips. Qin Pingon is for my son's sake in the end. Lu Qin rubbed his chin. This statement is correct, but it is not particularly accurate. Taoist Nin humbly asked for advice. I beg Master Lu to solve my doubts. Lu Qin said, Qin Pingon is from Ni Ping Alley, you know? Taoist Nin nodded and said, of course. That alley is a place where dragons and tigers are hidden. Qin Pingon, King Song Mu of the Dali domain, Zhu the true dragon king, and Guqin the Baidi city, are also the hometown and ancestral home of Chao Shi, the sword immortal of Nan Pasuozhou. Lu Qin leaned back against the railing and said lazily, in the old alley, there was a little slug who was nicknamed a slug by Qin Pingon and Lu Xianyang. Well, he is our little disciple of Mr. Zheng from Beidasheng. Taoist Nin said, Feng Shui is so frightening. Lu Qin raised a hand and pointed in a random direction. One of the 5 greatest blessings placed on the table in the Lizhu cave in the past was a small loach, which was caught by Qin Pingon from the fields and ridges. Guqan's eyes were greedy. Qin Pingon always regarded him as a half-brother, and of course he would not be stingy, so he gave it to Gukin. Gukin was raised in the family's water tank. Later he met Lu Zhimao, the true monarch of Zhejiang in Shijianhu, and worshipped his master. The mother and daughter went to Xianxia Island with Lu Zhimao together. They parted ways. The 14-year-old straw-shoe boy began to travel to the Great Sui dynasty. Qi Jingchun sent a group of students to him to the Mountain Cliff College. The youngest one is Li Huai. Lu Chen shook his sleeves. Qin Pingan doesn't want to make the same mistake. Daoist Nan said, I also hope Master Lu will elaborate on the reason. Lu Chen sighed. Pan Dao said so, still can't understand. His face was helpless. Lu Chen shook the jug, still raised the bowl and raised his head. Only a few drops of wine entered his mouth and wiped his mouth. The chance for the little loach was given to Guken by Qin Pingon himself. Guken was so young at that time, so why didn't he talk about being unsatisfactory? How did Qin Pingon tell you the previous sentence? With a sharp blade and killing heart, right? In that Shujian lake, which can be regarded as a little wild world, the owner of a water dragon in the nascent soul stage is a big boy. Life-saving talisman is also a kind of an unmatched hatchet, like walking into a large field of rapeseed flowers. A child with stubborn temperament, unconstrained, holding an hatchet, what he sees in his eyes is naturally delicate, and delicate the rapeseed flowers can be chopped and chopped at will. You may not be able to see the snakes and worms hidden in the fields and the owners of the rapeseed flowers. At the same time, that little loach has to be fed up in order to keep climbing on its own avenue. For example, if you want to move the peach pavilion to refine the mountain, you belong to the dragon. What else can you practice faster than directly eating the kikaman? The road. This is the nature of the little loach, and it is in agreement with Gukan's heart. Both the master and the servant are like a kind of a small harmony coupled with Lu Zimeo's cold-eyed observation. It is naturally a murderous intent. All around, one fierce outburst. That's why Qin Pingon was almost tortured by his senior brother Cui Yang. Only a little bit, his mood was completely broken. If I remember correctly, he once said to Gukan, sorry I'm late. Of course, the qualities of Li Huai and Gukan are very different when they looked at the two children back then. The two people of the same age look at the same timidity, but Gukan knows that they are weak. Li Huai only dared to lie down, but it was precisely because he had a warm family, and Li Huai knew the kindness of his relatives at a very young age. Gukan and Li Huai are like two kinds of life. One is extremely unhappy and wants to live a better life in the future. One is a poor home, which seems like life is not easy, but in fact, it is an extremely rare lucky thing for family members to sit and relax. Therefore, we must maintain this hard-won experience in the future. Good. So once Li Huai is led by you and becomes a person who will disappoint Mr. Qi in Qin Ping's mind, you will die, you will definitely. You are self-reliant, but you have always looked down on a young hidden official with a low level, but you don't know it. In fact, since Qin Pingon first learned that you became Li Huai's servant, he began to help you prepare a book. When he participated in the discussion at the Confucian temple in that Yuanyangzu, you thought that you were trembling with power and felt quite contented in your heart, but Qin Pingon had been watching with cold eyes, so today I arrived in Lushan and said a few candid words with you, lest he will kill you in the future and Senior Tao Ting will still feel wronged. Lu Chen sighed, stretched out his finger and clicked on the yellow-clothed old man. Previously, the poor road squatted on the road and cursed a stone as a stumbling block. People eat hot meals and dogs eat hot shit. Are you chewing on the aftertaste now? Well, what do you think of Tao Ting Senior, this expression? But I misunderstood the poor road, and the poor road does not mean eating hot. What's the aftertaste of chewing shit? Poor Dao means that there is something in your speech and it is deliberate. Like a Daoist, like the poor Dao talking and chatting, it is always difficult to go straight to the midwinter. And it has to be a little bit mysterious to match the identity. Daoist Nan looked embarrassed, so he had to say with ignorance of his conscience, Zhangjiao Lu is a philanthropist. It is both witty and far-reaching. Lu Chen smiled, turned his head and looked at the landscape outside the pavilion. If we regard each person in a mountain and a river as every word in an article, then you will miss too much. I have been practicing poor Taoism for so many years. There are only a handful of Taoists who have been tirelessly pursuing no fault, and who can approach infallibility. Qin Pingon can be counted as one. Of course, he is still the youngest one and for the time being the one with the lowest Taoism. Daoist Nan asked cautiously, why is Master Lu willing to give me some suggestions? Lu Chen sighed, are you an ascended realm great monk? Isn't it also a word? You are still such a big word standing in front of Pin Dao's eyes. How can Pin Dao miss it? People have no fault and life is missed. Missing things, missing people, thinking over and over again, are all faults, past faults. Lu Chen looked sad and looked up at the sky several times, wondering if he would leave without saying goodbye and escape. Even if it is destined to avoid the first day of the junior high school, but not the 15th. But as long as you survive the first day of the new year, doesn't it mean that you have 14 more days of stability? The young emperor of Mengliang, the goddess of water with the surname Nalan Jun Maishan, still sat 2 stops and stayed in the pavilion. Huang Tsong hopes that the two of them will be more casual, but the 2 deities of mountains and rivers just abide by the courtesy of monarchs and ministers. In fact, this is not a common occurrence in the officialdom of Xianxia. It is not necessary for the monarchs of the 5 mountains in a country, and the highest water in the country, to meet the emperor and monarch. But as a former military commander of the heroic spirit, Maishan Jun recognized the young emperor from the bottom of his heart, and Maishan Jun refused to sit down. Nalan Yuji, who was ranked as the Golden Jade genealogy, had to accompany him. Suddenly a young Taoist priest appeared. Nalan Yuji quietly pinched his fingers and smiled. I am so courageous, I went to the mansion privately. I saw that the young Taoist priest began to pretend to be crazy and behave stupidly. Huh? Did the trail go to the wrong door? It's all right, it seems that the trail and this sister have something to do with it. Fate. Wearing a fishtail crown, that is the Taoist priest of the gods. In Aquarius Island, no one would dare not take the golden rules and jade rules of the gods so seriously, and would pretend to be the gods of the gods. Jun Maishan glanced at the Taoist priest and said in his heart, Your Majesty, this Taoist priest is indeed from the gods, because there is a lantern hanging behind him with the words Kawaguan secret, and he is the kind of person who has the shade of the master and the ancestor. It looks like a cultivator in the Dragon Gate realm, but he is actually a golden core earth immortal, but it should have been formed just a few years ago and the weather is unstable. Nalan Yuji frowned and said, How did this guy get in? Why is there no chi ripple at all? Jun Maishan sneered, The ghost knows. Huang Tsong signaled that they don't need to be nervous. The visitors are the guests. There are many monks on the mountain who eat Xia Lu and are immortal, but there are few people who have weird temperament, have partial skills and enjoy the game of the world. Phew. Since I came to the wrong place, Pan Dao would be wrong. The young Taoist priest rushed up the steps, stood still, and after losing his hands he looked down at the game with a clear victory and defeat and nodded. The one who holds the white side is a top expert. The Water Empress stretched out her hand to touch her eyebrows. She said that she was sure of the stinky chess basket. Huang Tsong was still calm and asked with a smile, Dare to ask Dao Master, why do you say this? How do I think black is a sure win? The one who holds the white is oneself. Playing chess is one of the most boring things in the world. If you bet on high you will lose, but if you go high there is no lose. The young Taoist priest twisted the white pieces in one hand and the black pieces in the other. He placed it on the chessboard with a crackling sound, crisp and sweet. While placing the pieces on the chessboard he smiled and said, On the gambling table, unless it's an old one, you will be the best player. I feel unhappy even if it is a young child who just entered the trade. The opponent is lucky, such as throwing a dice 6 or 6 times. The master still has the time to lose money. But playing chess together, the master occasionally misses, faint moves, low hands, always due to the fact that the chess skills have not yet changed. Even so, when encountering a strong opponent the game is one move, but the difference is only 1.5. It is decided not to be above the chessboard. Black is dead, white is alive. As for those real chess masters, there is no reason to lose when facing weak chess players. For example, Embroidery Tiger Cui Yang or Jing Juzhong or... The young Taoist straightened his waist and pulled the collar of his robes. It's a poor Tao. After a short pause he continued, Hi brother. The Water Empress sneered and said, You can call Cui Guoxi's name casually? The young Taoist shook his head and smiled. What else can I do if I don't use my name to call it? Hey, why is the trend of this chess game different from what Feng Dao expected? As a result, the 3 players in the pavilion saw that the guy stretched out his hand and completely disrupted the game. Pan Dao takes all the previous words back. Take them all back. Huang Tsong couldn't help smiling and said, The Taoist chief is a wonderful person. Dare to ask the honorable name? Shenzhenzong Kawaguan Lu Fu. There is no Dao name for the time being. Qi Tianjun can't see the poor Dao. Nalan Yuji covered her mouth and smiled. It makes sense. Dao Chonglu can't see Qi Tianjun a few times, and of course Dao Chonglu can't see Qi Tianjun a few times. The young Taoist priest grinned and said, "This sister, she speaks so nicely, her voice is crisp like a midsummer plum and white porcelain soup, crushed ice clashes against the wall, and understanding it's really an explanation of the golden voice, jade rhyme and Hui Xinlan quality." Tweet. Hey, looking at my sister's attire, it seems to be exactly the same as Pin Dao, who is Su Zi's admirer. Coincidentally, it's not that poor Dao once had the luck to travel with Su Zi for several months, sing poems, talk about Taoism and Zen, which is a joy. Huang Tsong coughed a few times and he didn't know how to persuade this Daoist chief Lu to speak too much. Nailan Yuji joked, "Oh hey, does this count as a dog leaning on his mouth by the curtain?" The young Taoist priest didn't get annoyed at all, but instead said something thoughtless. "I had known that I had asked a senior to follow here and then it should be the scene." Jun Meishan's face was tense and he said with a heart, "Your Majesty, I can't bear it. Can I issue an order to chase away this servant?" Don't tell me, the originator of the world of chasing guests, the poor road is quite familiar with it. Jun Meishan was shocked. This Taoist priest could spy on his own voice? Before Mei Shanjun reminded the emperor and Nailan Yuji, the goddess of water had turned her head and looked at the door, reminding the young emperor in her heart, "Your Majesty, someone has come to visit, it's the Lord Qin of Lost Mountain." The young Taoist priest was sneaky and he seemed to have to grease the soles of his feet. But Nailan Yuji grabbed his arm. "Dao Master Lu, where are you going? According to your statement, don't miss it when you pass by." The young Taoist shook his arm as if he couldn't get rid of the restraints. He patted the back of the water god's hand lightly, and his eyes were sincere. Jun Meishan simply stopped talking and said straightforwardly, "Dao Chonglu is a master of Taoism. Since you can hear mice voice, why is it a of the soul?" The young Taoist laughed and said, "It's easy to talk and it's easy to talk." Nailan Yuji wanted to let go, but was shocked to find that she couldn't do it, as if she was stuck with a piece of brown candy. Different from the two mansions of Qin Lingjun and Li Huai, the mansions here are of course guarded by the masters of Mengliang country, and the young hermit who has signed up for himself was soon led respectfully to the pavilion. Qin Pingon glanced at Lu Shanin. Lu Qin immediately shook his arm vigorously and freed the slender hand of the goddess of water. With a shocked expression on his face, he trembled and said, "This handsome young student looks familiar. Could it be the Lord Qin of the fallen mountain Wenxing's lineage? The disciple of the gate, the last hermit of the summer palace, the second treasurer of the great wall of Jianqi, the poor friend in need Qin Daoyu." Qin Pingon said with a black face, "Come and cool down." "Okay." This Lu Chen's out-of-aperture Yin god jumped up and down. "I'll see you later, Pan Dao is waiting at the Qianqiu pavilion." Suddenly the trail disappeared. The three people in the pavilion together with Emperor Huang Tsong seemed to be confused. Huang Tsong returned to his senses and hurried out of the pavilion, but was speechless for a while and looked embarrassed. It was originally a very simple matter, but it was disrupted by the Daoist Lu, and the young emperor didn't even know how to call Qin Pingan, "The high head is not kind," and he threatened that if I don't come to see your Majesty, I won't let it go. Qin Pingon took the lead and said with a smile, "As for the observation of Lu Fu just now, your Majesty doesn't care about him, he is sick in his head, he is confused and often muddles." Huang Tsong, like a Confucian scholar, said, "Mengliang country Huang Tsong, pay tribute to Mr. Chen." With a solemn expression on Meishan Jun, he clasped his fists and said solemnly, "Song Shan Mei has seen the hidden official." The goddess of water leaned on her side and gave a blessing. "Nailan Yuji in the water mansion of the Moon River, I have seen Qin Jianxian." Stepping into the pavilion with the young emperor, Qin Pingon took a long green shirt and long gown and sat down gently. The pavilion holds pillars and is a pair of dragons. Open your eyes and see, the hundreds of years old in the world are nothing more than accumulating virtues and doing good, and there are gods 3 feet above their heads. It should be said that the first good thing in the world is to be determined to study and work hard to pay off. Qin Pingon smiled and said straightforwardly, "I heard my disciple Pei Qian talked about your Majesty, saying that there used to be a nobleman on the battlefield of Dali accompanying capital." Huang Tsong said bitterly, "I'm not too afraid of death, it's true, it's almost dead, it's true. On that battlefield there is no such thing as Huang Kong. It's just that so many soldiers of the Dream Liang Kingdom who went to death resolutely and generously died in vain? Absolutely not. But if you really want to say how to make contributions, it seems that it is far from enough. Anyone who joins the battlefield, as long as he has personally experienced those tragic battles, will have to admit one thing. The elite soldiers of the dynasty under the mountain face the monks on the mountain, watching those who are always shaking the world and moving. The magic of the immortal family is so desperate. So that these years have passed, the young emperor still often sweats profusely, wakes up from sleep, no matter how difficult it is to fall asleep, can't sleep at night, and his ears seem to be lingering with the sound of Jinguan iron horse. The young hermit seemed to see through the knot of the young emperor, shook his head and said, "If you want to win the battle of the year, the only way to win the battle is to fear death on the mountain and the mountain. If the mountain does not dare to die, the number of monks on the Aquarius mountain will double again. In the end, let alone defending the battle line in the middle of the great blasphemy, it will only be reduced to Tonggis's second place, and it will be run over by the wild monsters, and it will be beaten to Luzhou and Beiju. Aquarius is not missing a dream country. You won't be able to fight a war, but if you don't have a dream country in Aquarius, you will lose without disparity. Maybe now there is only one Middle-earth divine continent in Hauran." Mei Shanjin's eyes were shining and he couldn't help but said, "Well said." Nailan Yuji also nodded gently. The Taoist Nen had already returned, and the real body of Lu Qin here, with the out-of-aperture Yinshan gathered, was lying on the bench with his legs cocked and swayed. The inscription of the pavilion is Xianxia, and the most surprising thing is the plaque and couplets elsewhere in the world. The latter has far more characters than the former. However, the pavilion in Lushan does the opposite. A couple of couplets totals 2 words. Dream while waking up. Lu Qin smiled and said, "The opposite will move towards Tao, and the opposite will move towards Tao." The world generally acknowledges that the matter of cultivating Taoism is going against the sky. Everyone recognizes it, but no one wants to talk more. Real people live on land, immortal masters move mountains and seas, lift the sun and the moon, live forever, live with the heavens and the earth, and so on. Isn't it the biggest great rebellion in the world? As a result, this group of people has become a master of human beings. Is it considered a slander in the world? Qin Pingon and the young emperor left, came here, walked into the pavilion, did not take off those cloth shoes, sat cross-legged on the bench, took out the dry tobacco rod, tied the pipe to the bamboo rod, and began to rub the tobacco mixed with wild mountains. Shenmozi, sweet-scented osmanthus, dry tobacco rods were dropped into a small piece of no-character jade plate with a red string. "Tell me, what does that Zhou think?" Lu Qin shrunk his shoulders, leaned against the pavilion and leaned on the bench. He looked up at the sky. Hao Ran Jiaxing, whose real name is Jiamo, is not suitable for words, and he will be silent. He is a talented person. When he has become a wild old fox known as the sky and the sea, he is really careful in doing things. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I need you to say these old almanacs?" Lu Qin said, "Because Pang Dao has never dealt with him, he can only make some guesses. He probably thinks that only when we have us can we distinguish between good and evil, and the difference between right and wrong. There is no reason to talk to this kind of person. To put it nicely, the two sides quarrel, tell the chicken to talk to the duck, or say that the public is reasonable and the wife is reasonable. I can't persuade the other party. Maybe it's called Dideo different ways. To put it ugly, the other side is a kind of road that has been self-certified, can justify itself and do its own way. As for the road under Zhou's feet, can it be called a certain way? Seeing the avenue now, you can't see it, and someone will look back later. No matter who it is now, of course the poor master is an exception. For the rest of us, how carefully the avenue evolves is not necessarily what Zhou has in mind. The way you think about it. But in the current situation, no one wants to be the repeat customer, and they don't want to do that in the future. Therefore, the previous riverside discussion, even the fierce ant in our continent, one in order to be among the 14th, she is the one who can refine everything, but she is the first cultivator to propose to dismiss Zhou. Of course, it's not that she has an antagonism with Zhou, or she knows that Zhou's future is definitely not the future she wants in my continent. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "This my continent, I will never take the initiative to provoke her. The implication is that you and my continent don't come to provoke me." Lu Qin hesitated for a moment, raised his hand, rolled his sleeves vigorously. The landscape was hazy. Two Taoist priests were faintly visible, sitting and talking. A middle-aged Taoist priest with a hibiscus crown on his head and a gentle temperament. A young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown was suave and romantic. Before he left Bai Yujing, he had an extremely exhausting deduction in front of his junior brother Lu Chen, and finally came up with 3 results. One is that everyone can practice and they are all cultivators. All the spiritual beings who are expected to develop their body and form can also practice steadily. In this way, will the whole world be in an orderly manner? It can even be the monk of the 10,000 races in the world, no longer need to fight on the snail horns, no need to send this body in the stone flames, but merge into a long river of brilliance and travel together again and again to explore the world, to open up the territory and each choose one. Xianxia serves as the dojo, each branching out. Second, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is completely gathered in a few places, and the world seems to have entered an age of impossibility to do the end of the law early, falling into a situation where it is difficult for clever women to cook without rice. Therefore, there are spiritual beings in the world except for a handful of hanging. In addition, without exception, they are not allowed to practice, and these people must not interfere with the movement of the heavens and the earth. At most they are confined to a certain one corner of the earth, hidden in the big world and at ease in the small world, and must also follow certain secret agreements, can only be shot in a certain heaven and earth catastrophe to change the trajectory of heaven and earth. The third kind is to fall into chaos completely. Disorder is the only order. In fact, there is a fourth result. But the big brother did not let Lu Chen go to observe the Tao, because the Tao is not Tao. Lu Chen guessed it. It is heaven and earth are one. This is what Howren Jason used to be, and then wild and careful what he wanted to accomplish. Lu Chen rolled up his sleeves again, and after distracting the scene, he stretched out a jade white palm with the back of the hand facing up and the palm facing down. If I change to me, it is show me. First of all, become one, make great practice one. Turning the palm of his hand, Lu Chen smiled and said, secondly, his body is 1,000,000,000 trillion. Then it doesn't matter what kind of cultivating, proving and prospering, there is no such worry. Lu Chen continued, and then. Qin Pingon suddenly frowned slightly. Lu Chen gently bumped the pavilion with his head a few times and said with a knowing smile, the incarnation that Pang Dao talked about is not only transformed into a spiritual being. Qin Pingon nodded and said, go on. Understood, it is not just the 5 worlds today but the heavens suppressed by Bai Yujing, the suppressed by the Western Buddhist kingdom, and all the ancient stars etc. were all refined. It's like being made by a monk as a life thing. Collapse into one, break into 0. In this realm, any sword that cuts through the galaxy in the sky, or a light breath that can blow away an ancient star, is nothing like a Taoist method. If you are a monk in the 14th realm or even a 15th realm facing the thoroughness of the harmony, it is all vain because it is part of his great path. Qin Pingon raised Erlang's legs, held the cigarette stick, tapped the sole of the shoe, knocked off the ashes, reattached the tobacco and continued to swallow the clouds and fog. Lu Chen couldn't help but sighed. The 1,000-year-old house will be replaced by 100 owners, and it will be demolished and cleaned a year and renewed a year. Qin Pingon twisted his wrist and put the dry tobacco rod into the square inch. Teacher Lu, after talking about the emptiness, let's talk about the real thing. Lu Chen's head was as big as a dustpan. Hearing this honorific title of Master Lu, he knew there was nothing good. Qin Pingon stretched out his hand, 6 grains of rain money. Lu Chen helplessly said, you have to give gifts when you come to the house. This is a necessary etiquette. Besides, Nai Fuzi and the fellow Daoist are only 2 rainy coins. For them, what does the drizzle have to do with the hermit? Qin Pingon said, then let's not talk about the 2 of them. I also have a gift that will be given to the Huangliang Pai, so my 2 Guyu coins were converted into 20 small summer coins and brought them. After hearing the string, Lu Chen had no choice but to fumble and take out a bunch of small summer money, which were all orphans collected by Lu Zhangjiadong with a hoe. Qin Pingon chose 20, put them in his sleeves and stood up. Before I go down the mountain and before you return to Bai Yujing, I also have a picture scroll. Read it again. Lu Chen wanted to speak but stopped. I want to ask, since Pang Dao has seen it all, can you stop watching it? It's just that inside the pavilion there is already a vision and it is like a dream again. Between heaven and earth. A huge Dharma statue sits in the sky at the northernmost tip of Aquarius Island. The catastrophe is approaching and the sea of clouds slowly hangs down, approaching the head of the Dharma image. The scholar raised his head with a smile on his face. A celestial immortal spoke loudly, speaking with the law. Leifa is full of clouds and lightning is like thousands of dragons walking in the sea of clouds. Then there was another golden palm which churned out a huge hole in the sea of clouds. This majestic fairy sitting high on the top of the sea of clouds calls himself this seat. The Confucian figure of Huang on the temples, his palms changed into fists, and he stretched out his hand to shake the bead in his heart. It was at this moment that the small town within the Liju cave that year was instantly like night. The Immortal sitting on the top of the sea of clouds like sitting on the top of a well, seemed to be overlooking the frog at the bottom of the well with sarcasm and laughter. There is a word that vibrates like thunder. I will play with you first. With this, 12 flying swords pierced the sea of clouds from the sky and fell into the world. The golden giant opened a pair of pure golden eyes, and he was lazy, sitting cross-legged with his fists on his knees and a finger with his right fist. Flick your fingers. A flying sword pierced the imaginary arm of the Confucianist Faxiang's fist if he was ordered. The golden giant above the sea of clouds stretched out a finger in each of his hands. Every time the finger was raised and lowered, the finger was gently rotated, and there was a flying sword drawing an arc. The entire arm of the Confucianist law was stabbed with thousands of holes by the flying sword. Splash the cold water of the spring breeze with a rain of flying swords. Numerous golden silk threads seep out from the sea of clouds. The thunder magic dragon in 3 colors with bright electric light intertwined 3 large nets like a knife to wipe away the Confucianism. At the same time, a great array of heaven and earth was formed, absorbing the spirit of heaven and earth frantically, isolating the Confucian scholar from the avenue of the awe-inspiring world, and at the same time preventing this person's feet from falling on the ground of Aquarius. Even if Confucian scholars are scholars in the world, the 2 who shot are Baiyujing gods who have crossed the world. The time and place are right and they can't be given to the former. The golden giant fell with a punch and directly punched the raised hand of the snow-white face. The palm of the latter's palm was smashed out of a big pit and his palm broke and shattered. After that, his arm was smashed by the punch. Only half of his arm remained. The Confucian student's left hand was always held empty and motionless. However, from the fist of the virtual grip, to the arm to the shoulder, there have been chapters of the Thunder Method and Tao Tactics covered with treasures of green chapters, and every text that contains the true meaning of Thunder Method is as big as a house. The on the cloud joined together to make a sword tactic, slashed down and cut off the fist of the Confucian scholar from the shoulder. The broken arm was blown to pieces by those Daoju texts on the spot. With only half of his right arm left, the Confucianist raised it up and tilted it out again, blocking the bead like an umbrella to cover the rain, and at the same time he swept the bead back to protect him. Above the sea of clouds, the golden giant hit the head of the Confucianist with a fist. In a world of law formations, huge ripples of qi were stirred up. With every punch, the Confucianist's legal status fell by 1 point. The body has no arms, only a dangling fist that has no arms connected to the body. A terrible image is just to guard the remaining fist. The way of the scholar, his lips moved slightly and he read silently as if he was still in the school, facing the children with immature faces and clean eyes. And for those students who would call themselves Mr. Qi, the last lecture was given. The stars revolve, the sun and the moon pass the bamboo, the 4 eras are imperial, the yin and yang are greatly transformed, the wind and rain are beneficial, all things get their harmony in life and each gets its cultivation. In the rural school without Mengtong, the Confucian scholars with frosty white temples are covered with snow-white heads. Qi orifices are bleeding and bloody. Finally, the soul is broken, not enough to support the body like a piece of porcelain falling heavily to the ground, but it is broken silently, like a spring breeze in the world coming and going. It seems that from beginning to end the Confucian scholars did not fight back, just parry. Taoism is not high enough. Has quietly entered the 14th realm and had 3 natal characters at that time. Good temper? Wensheng's direct disciple. In fact, the best temper is left and right and the worst is this one. It was the man who stepped Xingyang Mountain on the ground with 1 foot, and even the one who joked that Jiazi would step on Xingyang Mountain with 1 foot before. As the 3rd head of Baiyujing taught, Lu Chen's expression changed slightly. He wanted to speak a few times but he stopped talking and finally didn't say anything. Qin Pingon stood in the pavilion, looked into the distance and said, "Don't pretend to be guilty, I know you." Lu Chen is not afraid of this at all. As expected, Lu Chen immediately recovered his calm expression and said in a calm tone, "You shouldn't use your enthusiasm, you should borrow a Dao Fa." And the green shirt guest, who is no longer a strawshoe boy, also looked calm. Because all emotions are cut one by one. There is me Qi Jingchun in the world. Too happy. But I can only meet one Mr. Qi. The brother once said a word from right to left. Reasonable and useful. What do I do with swords? So practice sword. Being able to be in Zhou Xian in the Middle Earth. Tell Zhou Yu freely that I, Qin Pingon, will become a pure sword repairman in the 14th realm. In my life, Qin Pingon, through the mountains and rivers, must not just make a living, never just seek a living. So learn boxing. Only in that weird place Qin Pingon and that weird existence can finally say, a level higher than your fist. On the 12th floor of the 5th city of Baiyujing, Jiang Zhaomo, the owner of the Ziki Tower, is known as the second master of Yudo, the highest swordsmanship and also martial arts. In addition, the old city master who is proficient in Lei Fa Pengding has the title of Humbly. He has extremely old aptitude and long Dao age. He is known as the first person in the Qingming world to practice thunder technique. At the same time, he also practiced the 5 elements technique, all of which are extremely accomplished. And these two are all from the same line as the second son of Taoism. Originally, Qin Pingon was destined to not be able to see this picture of time before he reached the 14th realm. Moreover, Lu Qin was kept in the dark about rechecking this picture scroll. In this way, Qin Pingon started to study the arithmetic of Yin-Yang family very early. In fact, it is true. Qin Pingon had said to the sword bearer many years ago that I might learn a little Yin and Yang technique in the future. Back then, when I first met a swordsman with a donkey wearing a hat and a donkey, I had a conversation with a boy in straw sandals. The young man said that there are some revenges that must be avenged. As long as there is no revenge for a day, then he will live for 100 years and he will be able to remember 96 years. The swordsman asked with a smile, "You have eaten the remaining 4 years." The boy replied stubbornly, "Before I was 5 years old I had parents who were ignorant and didn't count." Qin Pingon raised his head and looked towards the sky. Big irregularities are small disrespect. Jiang Zhaomo and Pengding. When Qin Pingon am in the Qingming world, you too will be careful when walking at night. The ship capsized in the gutter and died in the ditch, which is just a coffin. Therefore, the 3 empty coffins in the small building in the LV Gong temple site were actually Qin Pingon telling Lu Qin. 3 coffins, Jiang Zhaomo 1, Pengding 1, Yudo. As long as you Lu Qin don't lie down, it has nothing to do with you. Lu Qin stood up and smiled and said, "Understood. After this goodbye, the landscape is swaying you and I. What do you say?" Qin Pingon said, "I do my own way." Sword of Coming Chapter 942. What a do it your own way. Sure enough, it was sword practice and the world was unfettered. Just when Qin Pingon was about to leave the pavilion, Lu Qin smiled and said, "I heard that there is a mountain of pretentiousness on the side of Qingping sword sect." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "Xiandu mountain is the master, and the 2 mountains are supplemented by the preparation and the cloud steaming. It is the pattern of the 3 mountains. Since Cui Dongshan is the next suzerain, naturally he has his own plans. According to Cui Dongshan, since the weather is about to change, it is time to plan ahead and plan ahead." Lu Qin also nodded. "I couldn't land on Tonggishao before." Pang Dao just glanced at the sea from a distance. The monument was erected on the top of the mountain. The inscriptions on the monument, "My Chow can't come out," and "Heaven and Earth Purple Qi," are the inscriptions on the monument. His handwriting, however, no longer resembles the handwriting of embroidered tiger, but retains a bit of spirit. After leaving the yoke according to the mountain, it is a kind of immortal. Lu Qin turned his head and smiled. "Pan Dao is here. You have to congratulate your proud student Chao Sunny in advance. The retreat is successful and the pill formation is between the 1st and 2nd grades. Countless possibilities." Qin Pingon was relieved and nodded. "It's very good. The legendary 1st rank of pill formation is recognized as the qualification of ascension. It is rare, and the 2nd rank is the capital of the upper 5 realms. However, many of the great mountain monks who are now in the world, the golden pill rank at the beginning, is actually the 2nd rank." Lu Qin asked, "About me, Qi Jingchun, Tui Yang and Cui Dongshan, did they all tell you something such as reminding you of the way to get along with me?" Qin Pingon said, "Mr. Qi just said a gentleman can deceive him. The implication is that you, Lu Qin, or Bai Yujing's 3rd head teacher at that time, weren't enough to let Mr. Qi and the boy of Ni Ping Alley at that time confess anything deliberately. What's more, in this sentence, the biggest original intention or Mr. Qi's hope is to let Qin Ping know the truth in the future, Not to be too guilty and not too guilty. Lu Chen whispered, Qi Jingchun doesn't care about anything. What do you care about, Qin Pingon? If it weren't for you to be so hostile to Bai Yujing, you went to the Qingming world with what you did on the Great Wall of Jianqi where you are not a guest. Take 10,000 steps and say as long as you don't deal with the poor brother even if you just die with Jiang Zhaomo and Pang Ding, you will still be a distinguished guest on the 11th floor of the other 4 cities in the future. I don't know how many Bai Yujing's fairy sisters, how curious and admired they are for the youngest city engraver in the 10,000-year history, hidden official Qin Shi. Qin Ping placed Ruo deaf but said to himself, Cui Dongshan said if your husband really has to deal with Bai Yujing in the future he must follow the old cook's choice of vegetables and pick out a Lu Shen. Obviously Cui Dongshan's meaning is very simple. If the husband wants to ask Jian Bai Yujing, it is best to bypass Lu Shen and cut the 3 masters of Bai Yujing from the whole Bai Yujing. Only with such an advance can the chances of winning come to an end. Master Hermit, the most important person, you can't omit it. Lu Chen smiled and said, Qi Jingchun is an upright gentleman. No matter how high he is, no matter how knowledgeable he is, he can't be a villain alone. Your brother Cui Yang is not the case. Qin Pingon asked with a smile. Besides the patriarch of the 3 teachings, Lu Chen also has people who are jealous? To the point where he needs to be jealous of what words this person said? Lu Chen looked serious and nodded. If Cui Yang is not distracted by the world and let him specifically target someone, then the person being targeted, even if it is Xing Juzhong will have to suffer at least for each other. Because Cui Yang's behavior is similar to that of a poor man. Lu Chen squinted and smiled, clasped his fists in his hands and shook lightly. I implore Master Yingguan to solve the doubts about the poor road. Qin Pingon said, You guessed it all, so why bother with my tongue? Cui Yang is ruthless. Lu Chen touched the lotus crown on the top of his head. Qin Pingon, you are too far behind Cui Yang. Cui Yang's plan was a trip to the wild hinterland led by the young hermit. After success such as after Qin Pinganjian opened the Tuyue mountain, before moving around of Mingyue Haotsai into the Qingming world. Without warning, Qin Pingon suddenly joined forces with Ning Yao, Qi Tingji, Criminal Haosou and Lu Ji. Let's get rid of Lu Chen. In addition to Lu Ji's natal flying sword, only the attacking strength can be regarded as an ascending realm sword repairman. Then it's Qin Pingon plus 4 ascended realms Jian Xiu. Outside the Qingming world and Bai Yujing, encircled and suppressed a Lu Chen of the 14th realm. Lu Chen sighed. This is the last time Cui Yang appeared in the Great Wall of Sword Qi and told you about this plan? And with your realm at the time, it is difficult to hide from the sky. Cui Yang must have used some unique secret method long ago. Having said this, let you forget it and finally let you remember it at a certain moment so that you can turn your face with me in an instant, cross the river and tear down the bridge and violently kill people. Even leaving aside Qin Pingon, who is returning to the realm, only talks about a joint siege with 4 ascending sword repairs, especially an old sword fairy with lettering on the city's head, and a new world co-master. Coupled with Lu Ji's natal flying sword Beidou, the criminal officer Haosu would not consider his life or death when he asked people about the sword. And at a certain critical moment, Qin Ping's 2 natal flying swords might be the winners and losers. Who can stand it? Qin Pingon was silent and did not deny but actually admitted. As for why Qin Pingon made up his mind not to do this, it was because there was a trial and finally unexpectedly, Qin Pingon got a certain result. At that time Qin Pingon said something. On this trip to the barren hinterland, the guardian who walked with the hidden official Qin Pingon was awe-inspiring. Lu Chen replied sincerely with a solemn expression. Howren Lu Chen, fortunately to be with you. At that moment, Qin Pingon was extremely certain that Lu Chen had not faked anything. A 3-handed master who had been in Bai Yujing for thousands of years truly recognized his Howren status and was willing to regard Howren Xianxia as real. Hometown. Lu Chen glanced at Qin Pingon. Fortunately this guy is more like Qi Jingchun, who is not like Cui Yang. In the final analysis, compared with the basic knowledge passed down by the old scholars, Cui Yang can study this knowledge to the extreme, and Qin Pingon it just barely learned a similarity which is half of Cui Yang's character, so the remaining half is not something that Qin Pingon can learn if he wants to learn. Since the hermit is so sincere to others, it is not easy to hide and tempt the poor Dao. Lu Chen lifted a sleeve and put his fingers together, and 2 women as small as mustard seeds appeared walking around Liangzhu. One of the women was holding Kaon's hair in a bun, showing great demeanor, and the other was wearing a green skirt with a lotus root and white shirt, and stepped on a pair of embroidered shoes. It was the two incense-burning women who walked out of the Yedong gate of the Fen shrine. When Lu Chen first saw the two girls afterwards, he silently said that it was pear blossoms and apricot blossoms. This means that Qin Pingon has tried his best to ask Lu Chen to enter the urn, whether it is true or true, false or false, depending on whether Lu Chen's mood is good or bad and whether he tells it or not. Only because Qin Pingon, who stood by the pool and waited for the rabbits and then caught the turtles in the urn, was the caged bird in Lu Chen's sleeve. It seems that the mantis is catching the cicada and the oriole is behind, but in fact the slingshot is down. But Qin Pingon seemed to have anticipated this a long time ago, and there was no ups and downs in Taoism and Gu Jing did not wave. Lu Chen asked, "Did Qi Tingji ever quietly remind you that he was willing to help?" With Cui Yang's method, there must be sufficient reasons to convince Qi Tingji early to make the old sword Immortal willingly sacrifice the soldier solution, and send Lu Xian on the road. Qin Pingon still didn't speak. Lu Chen leaned against the pillars of the pavilion. "Qin Pingon, speak with conscience, tell yourself, do you want to be afraid of this embroidered tiger?" Qin Pingon was silent for a long time and said, "I have always heard that you have 5 dreams and 7 mental states, each of which has a great way to manifest. Butterfly." Lu Chen moved his sleeves with both hands and smiled. This kind of unique skill at the bottom of the box can't be easily shown to others. Before a young and energetic hot-blooded person who cares about his head, I will borrow you to do the Dao Fa, but of course the poor Dao has to be a little bit. Fengshan, once you get caught by a guy like you who likes to think about things, the consequences will be disastrous. Speaking of this, Lu Chen said tentatively, "Pan Dao saying off thinking about the east and thinking about the west is a pun, can you hear it?" Lu Chen was saying that the purple air came from the east, Taoism was in the east, the Buddhist kingdom in the west and Buddhism was in the west. In the middle ground. Qin Pingon squinted at Lu Chen. Lu Chen sighed, "How can I talk to idiots like fellow Daoist Qing Tong and Taoist Nun for too much so that poor Dao always feels that he doesn't speak thoroughly, it's like talking in vain. Sure enough, I'm still chatting with you after all, it doesn't take much effort." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I heard that Dao Changsun has a wonderful evaluation of you." Lu Chen hugged the back of his head with both hands and said lazily, "It's the seemingly repetitive Lu Chen can't beat anyone, can't beat anyone? If you switch to Lu Chen, no one can beat Lu Chen and no one can beat Lu Chen. In fact, the meaning is very simple." Qin Pingon slowly said, "Meng Confucian Jingwan, greedy for his own power, finally chose to commit suicide. In the dream, the skull relapses into the dream, despising the joy of being king in the south. The oak tree is alive, the dreaming turtle is dead, and the dream is turning into a butterfly. I don't know who is who. These 5 dreams have their own avenues and manifestations. Among them, the real Bon who walks under the sky is the most obvious. But at the beginning, according to the historical records of the Summer Palace and the Confucian Temple, it seems that the whole building is green. Ming Tianxia doesn't know that you have 5 more mysterious dreams besides the 7 things in your mind. In order to not have to fight with people, I have to show some strength so that the other party will retreat in the face of difficulties so as not to hurt the peace." Lu Chen smiled and raised his hand, bent his elbow a few times and said, "A lot of meaningless disputes, what are you most afraid of?" "I'm afraid that one party has already felt completely torn and he is full of mines." "I don't think so, but no one believes it. Is there any greater grievance in the world than this?" The earliest 3 masters of Qingming world took turns in charge of Bai Yujing for 100 years. Lu Chen seemed to be the one who had nothing to do, but after all he was a communist who had been in charge of the world for 100 years in name. The undercurrent surging in it was completely imaginable. Moreover, according to Bai Yujing's rules, once a certain brother instructs the world, the other 2 should never interfere in any affairs. It is rumored that this is a rule set by the Taoist ancestor himself. This means that Lu Chen, who likes to leave Bai Yujing and travel long distances alone, will be slaughtered on the road and completely dead. Then the whole Qingming world will appear, the dragons have no head, and the world has no owner. And the other 2 masters were still unable to take action. No matter how chaotic the world was, they would have to wait until the set hour before they could take over Bai Yujing and come forward to clean up the mess. Qin Pingon asked, "Meng Confucian Jingwan, who was greedy for his own power, chose to commit suicide in the end. He could only dream of cedars and cypresses. You, the ancestor of the Lu family, are insinuating against the Lu family of Yin and Yang." "Zhou Zi?" Lu Tai was born in the Lu family of Yinyang family, one of the two preaching mentors. Besides swordsman Pei Min, the other is Zhou Zi, who does everything in heaven. Zhou Zi talks about the sky and Lu's talk about the land is recognized by the vast world. And Zhou Zi is reputed to monopolize half of the Yin and Yang family, and it is the consensus on the mountain. Zhou Zi is very respectful of Lu Tai, otherwise there would be no sword repair Lu Kai. But after Lu Tai met Qin Pingon that year, Lu Tai seemed to have a big disagreement with his mentor Zhou Zi, and this matter was finally distinguished from Confucianism and Moism by Jing Zhong and his younger brother, one of the 5 dreams of Lu Xun. Somewhat similar. It is true that I am different from Zhou Zi Dao. Lu Qin waved his hand quickly, disassociating himself from the relationship and said, "It's just that the poor Wei doesn't have this ability. I can accurately predict that in the future, there will be the most unfilial descendant of the ancestor Lu Tai and you." Qin Pingon said, "I answered your 3 questions earlier." Lu Qin blinked. "Isn't it a problem?" Lu Qin hesitated. "Before I went to set up a stall in Liju Cave, I withdrew my 2 dreams one mind from Qingming world, and when I reached Haoran world before I entered Liju Cave, I withdrew my mind again." You should have guessed about the latter, otherwise you won't ask Pindao the source of the Xia of one of the ancestors of Chenglujia, the 8 deities. In addition, it is indeed related to the rogue Jinli and Longhushan Tianshi mansion. To be honest, the more poor Dao stays in Baiyujing, the more he is more inclined to the phrase "there are monsters at work, there must be Longhushan Taoist." I find it interesting, hoping to unlock the basis of the word Xian based on this. For example, a person with relatively ordinary aptitude for Taoism is faster in the mountain, but the height of Taoism is limited. It's still, people, slower, but the avenue's achievements are higher, so I want to experience this experience personally as a Huangzi nobleman. And finally this person sits in an island grotto near Jialonggu. Hua, the soldiers are resolved. But even if Pandao takes back the 2 dreams and 1 mind and 1 breath, even if there has been a deduction and evolution that has paid enough attention to that Liju Dong Tian. Lu Qin showed a somewhat melancholy expression and said helplessly, "Facts have proved that the poor road is still big and Qi Jingchun is underestimated. If I knew it, it was time to take back the real bone man who tried to dominate the guest. It belongs to him. He is the most rebellious and rebellious. You're going to be the emperor. This guy is good. He has cultivated the Tao for 3,000 years. He has been tirelessly seeking only one thing, which is to create his own rebellion. It is no wonder that he will dazzle with our gentleman Yao Qing. Master Lu can be called the second one. Before I went to the Great Wall of Jianqi to find you so as not to overturn the boat in the gutter and the good things turn into bad things, I took care of myself, so I took back my dream and my mind. They were the Confucian teacher Jing Chu in the dream, and the stunned wood chicken in the lotus roots. Usually I met with Lu Tai by the way and we had a very happy conversation. We had a good conversation. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It seems that I have to listen to my student's reminder." Lu Qin asked back. "The third answer is, do you want to ask the poor Dao to return to the Qingming world what else you want to take back, or you want to ask the poor Dao's retraction, whether it is dream interpretation or mental state, their fate, what is it?" "The latter. Get a kind of freedom that is no longer implicated in puppets. Whoever is who is, it's not me Lu Qin anyway." In fact, regarding Lu Qin there is actually another argument from Xian Duguan, but it is relatively less popular than Sun Daicheng's golden words. Lu Qin is not a real person. What you see in your eyes is not true. Qin Pingon suddenly asked a shocking question. "That Mr. Zheng from Beidasheng? Isn't it one of your 5 dreams and 7 attitudes?" Lu Qin was dull and speechless. Wasn't his head clamped by the door panel to ask this kind of question? Lu Qin was hit by 5 thunders, hurriedly folded his hands, raised them high, muttered a word and said with a grimace in his eyes, "Qin Pingan, we can barely be regarded as a dispute between gentlemen? Then you are a Confucian with a Confucian tradition. A protégé who is still the most disciplined martial artist, can he speak a little bit of justice? Even if there is such a grudge and personal enmity between the 2 of us, but you can never use this kind of indiscriminate blame means?" His mother's Jing Zhezhong's brain is really faulty. If he thinks, "Am I the Taoist ancestor?" Jing Zhuzhong can't do anything to take the poor Taoist master, but if he is full he will have another, "I am the master." It's not Lu Qin. What do you tell me, Lu Qin? Have you ever considered the feeling of being poor? Qin Pingon smiled. "I feel better." Lu Qin turned his head to look at the mountains and rivers outside the pavilion. and sighed for no reason. The mountains and rivers are magnificent and easy to catch people's eyes. If you are not careful, you will be fascinated by the wind. Thousands of thousands only in this matter about Mo is too accustomed to it, so few people pay attention, seldom remind the younger generations. Cultivators, not more than ordinary masters, need to concentrate, not to be charmed by flowers, not to be blasphemed by the mountains and rivers. Flowers, trees and beauties, all of which have taken away the slightest bit of mind, but I want to be the host and use it for my use. I will be the host. Qin Pingon nodded and said, "It's going to the method. It's not to help say some excuses but to tell the truth. The poor senior brother Yu who does things has never been a little selfish. It couldn't be simpler. Brother Yu has 2 good cultivating qualifications, 2 broad Taoism and 2 high swordsmanship. As far as senior brother Yu is concerned, he will not have any personal enmity at all. Of course he acts impartially, which does not mean that he will not forge private enmity, such as the junior Daochang son from Zuanduguan, the Daoist partner who was Su Gong Wu Shuangjiang, and of course your senior brother Qi Qin Pingon like you one by one, all of which will be accounted for in by Yujing to Master Yudo's body. It's okay to say on the side of Zuanduguan. After all, it was the senior man who went out in person wearing a feather coat and an immortal sword, broke into Zuanduguan and killed Daochang Sun's juniors with his own hands. Daochang Sun is hard to let go, and the poor Dao can understand a little bit. On the side of Wu Shuangjiang, his Taoist companion just died within the avenue rules made by senior brother by Yu Jinjiu. As for you, if Jiang Zhaomo and Pang Ding killed Qi Jingchun, there is nothing to deny. Under the eyes of everyone, they're too respected by Yujing Xianxians, relying on their status and Taoism, are not afraid of being sought after. And you, a junior brother, relied on guessing and trying to piece together the truth, and then saw that scene with your own eyes, so it is reasonable to ask them for a statement. But brother Yu has not really made any moves, and then it was the poor Dao who avoided Qi Jingchun in that dead end. The poor Dao is strange. Why do you treat your brother so hate? Lu Qin was indeed curious about this. Logically speaking, Qin Pingon couldn't predict the conversation between himself and brother Yu. At most, it was the step-thought of Lin Jingqing, the third head of Bai Yujing, who taught Lu Qin, holding a Bai Yujing who could cross the sky to Aquarius at any time, forcing Qi Jingchun to make a detour. If possible, Lu Qin still hoped to take this old account on himself. After all, after a careless one, after the ancestor of the 3 teachings went out, the first fight between monks in the 14th realm would happen in the Qingming world, just in Bai Yujing. Otherwise, Li Shixing, one of the big brothers, would never have told him that word early on the Qingliangzong of Luzhou in Beiju. That is a heavy, heavy remark. Coupled with a certain conclusion that Lu Qin just reached, it was not a fight between 2 14th realm great monks. 3. Brother Yudo. Xuantaguan Sun Huaizhong, Su Gong Wu Shuangjiang every year. On the mountain, ask the heart on the mountain. Is it hard to guess? It's not difficult at all. Every cultivator on the mountain spends his entire life explaining and verifying a certain truth. Qin Pingon said calmly, I believe that the Grand Master Bai Yujing, who has not yet 1 gasification and 3 cleansing, is willing to bear the consequences of losing a great dispute. This is due to the Dao heart of the Master Ko Ming. So, there is no need for Mr. Li from Fulu Street or the Taoist priest of God's divine sect to explain anything to anyone. It is an established fact. The same is true for the saints of our awe-inspiring world. Once a little master, later saints of the Confucian temple, wherever he stands, is the ceremony. You, Lu Qin, respect the big brother, but you are Lu Qin and you are definitely not as persistent as Yudo, so what you did in Liju Dongtian was that you didn't seem to do anything. Of course it's just looks. But I also believe that in those years of setting up stalls, you must have thought of many compromising methods. The reason why you can't do it is that you don't dare to add extravagance and it's too mixed. In the process of teaching harmony, even if Lu Qin is willing to step back and give way, it is impossible to do. Because Yu Do is the real behind-the-scenes person. It is the second head teacher of Bai Yujing who wants to eradicate all the objects of the great Dao controversy for the master teacher. A senior, the only Taoist who can enter the 15 realms, can only be the senior who preached and taught him. If I am not wrong, Yu Do must threaten with words before you return to Haoran and enter the Liju cave. After you, just like I threatened Taoist Nin before. Why, did Master Lu didn't hear what I was saying, or did he pretend to be stupid? Lu Qin rubbed his face with both hands, and Ping Dao still preferred to chat with fellow young fellows or tender Daoists. In fact, both sides knew it well, but they didn't bother to say something wrong. As long as Qin Pingyuan asks Jian Bai Yujing in the future, no matter what the reason is, Yu Dou, the second instructor of Bai Yujing, will never stand idly by. Qin Pingyuan squinted his eyes and said, "Understood." Lu Qin looked surprised and said, "Huh? Why do you learn to speak poorly?" Qin Pingyuan smiled and said, "No wonder you would say more of these extra words. It turns out that King Ming's world is already full of internal worries. Otherwise, a self who is not an upper 5-level sword repairer now, there is no need to make a self-proclaimed understand Lu Qin so much trouble. Far more than. The difficulty of asking Jian Bai Yujing was much more difficult than asking Jian Tuo Yueshan. So it is extremely possible that Dao Chang's son has quietly entered the 14th realm, and he is a pure sword repairer? Wu Shuangjiang's presence on the night ship was tantamount to a tugu, and even began to restore a certain identity. An Sui Chugong Wu Shuangjiang, he has the status of a Taoist official who goes to the countryside to follow the customs. But don't forget that the Lord Wu is a sergeant monk who can accompany the martial arts temple. On that battlefield, will you pay attention to benevolence and justice? As for Xuandu Temple, when dealing with disputes on the mountain, it is even more famous that we single you out and you single out a group of us. So Sun Guanzhu and Wu Shuangjiang jointly asked Jian Bai Yujing. To be precise, they were actually asking Jian Yudou alone. Qin Pingyuan asked, "After returning to Bai Yujing, will you interpret dreams if you can interpret your dreams, and all your minds that can be acquainted?" Lu Qin helplessly said, "There is nothing to do, poor Dao is after all Master's most distressed disciple." Qin Pingyuan smiled and said, "Then I won't say the kind words that resemble a good voyage." Lu Shenmei said, "As today, thanks to the poor Taoist master, the term Taoist has been exclusively used by Taoism for 10,000 years. Qin Pingyuan frowned and said, "After 10,000 years, take 10,000 steps and say that there will be no one who cultivates the Taoist school. By then your Taoist knowledge will not be too weak. It is impossible to say that there will be a culture and education roots. It is said that, in any case, just a sentence off doing nothing, people of any status, especially emperors, generals and ministers, must be highly respected." Lu Qin sullened his face. Qin Pingyuan rolled his eyes and said, "Laugh if you want to laugh. How can I compare my knowledge of extrapolation and arithmetic with you masters?" Lu Qin laughed loudly and finally put his smile away. In today's world, the word Jiangu has changed a lot, and forgotten in the rivers and lakes has changed accordingly. But after 10,000 years, will there be no rivers and lakes? The water is all dry like fish on land, can only be moistened by each other? Lu Qin was talking about the arrival of the Dharma era, and he only talked about one thing, the world under the common people no longer able to practice, the spiritual energy of the world is exhausted like the sea dry, and all living beings are like swimming fish on the land. Then the Confucianism today is near, the Buddhism is broad and the Taoism is high. What will happen after 10,000 years? It's hard to see how the Taoist priests live and die and see where the Taoism goes. Regarding this matter, not only Lu Qin, senior brother Ko Ming and master, each had their own deductions. It's just that Lu Qin didn't want to worry about the sky, it was relatively shallow, just used to play the luminous shadow, but the brother wanted to find a real way to crack it. As for how the master thinks, it is estimated that it will be deeper, better and higher than the senior. Qin Pingyuan asked, "Is it worried about the embarrassing situation? Offy is not high, but low is not good. High is still high, just a layer is missing in the middle?" Lu Qin sat up and shook his sleeves. The old saying is that it's up to people to get things done. It's really discouraging. Since cultivating Taoism is a matter of 30 minutes, I want to do so much. Lu Qin suddenly said, "Qin Pingyuan, if I see the Most Holy Master later, the Most Holy Master will probably ask you a question." Qin Pingyuan asked, "How do you tell?" Lu Qin smiled and said, "For example, ask how you think about the 3/4 controversy." Qin Pingyuan nodded, "It's possible." Lu Qin asked, "Couldn't the most sage master already ask you?" Qin Pingyuan said, "How do you think I should answer?" Lu Qin said, "Difficult. It is no problem to raise one's own Wunsheng line, and slightly depreciate the subsage line. It is no problem to be in love with selfishness, but there is a big problem in being fair and reasonable. But it is even more wrong to say that Qin Pingyuan does not speak for his orthodox context, or that he blindly rejects the subsage line. If it is said that one answer is both good, this kind of mashup answer, can't it be treated as a joke by the elders of the Most Holy Master? Lu Chen smiled and said, "Why don't you just bypass the three-fourth controversy, but it's not really bypassing when Xianxia's two-line learning?" Qin Pingon nodded and said, "Something makes sense." Lu Chen helplessly said, "What about sincerity? What is the good manner of the monk Luopashen who has always treated people with sincerity? Tell me, what is your answer?" Qin Pingon said, "Z said." Lu Chen immediately answered, "Is there any kind of education?" Qin Pingon nodded. Lu Chen gave a thumbs up and said in amazement, "Neither does he downplay the sub-sage line, but he infinitely uplifts the most sage master, and he secretly stamps the Wenxing line over the sub-sage line by half. Yours." After hearing this, senior brother Zhou Xian could only smile and be very happy. He would only feel that he has the roots of his great power, and there is such a magical effect. Qin Pingon said, "I don't really think like this in my heart, do I dare to say that?" Lu Chen was silent for a moment and had to nod his head, "That's right. Knowing this a long time ago, poor Dao should be cruel and knocked this kid directly into a sapset sack to buy Yujing as a junior." Lu Chen looked up at the sky. "It's going to rain." Qin Pingon took the lead out of the pavilion. Before leaving his hometown, the straw shoe boy in Ni Ping Alley left the town. Old man Yang from the drugstore once reminded him to leave the backyard with the umbrella and hand it to the schoolmaster. One big and one small walk in the rain together under an umbrella. Sword of Coming Chapter 943. Lu Chen followed out of the plaque, Xianxia, and the couplet was just a pavilion with the word Meng Wake. After walking down the steps, he turned his head and took a look. "I don't know when it will be the next time I revisit the old place. The identity of the old Master Yao, the master of our kiln, was already known when you set up the fortune-telling booth back then?" Pan Dao was not sure about Yao's identity at the time, so I could only guess a little bit. Deducing the secrets in the Lizhu cave is the most thankless, and it is easy to backfire. Then do you think Mr. Qi knows? Qi Jingchun stayed in the Lizhu cave for a long time and he has the identity of a saint. Most of it has been known for a long time. Therefore I have been rehearsing the matter afterwards, especially after a long time. Accident. The small town has accumulated 3,000 years of huge calamity, and the cause and effect of all the local people in the small town are destined to be inevitable and will never fall in the empty place. But those who are willing to clean up this mess, in fact, in addition to the Confucian Qi Jingchun, there are many others. Old man Yao, whose background is hidden, comes from a Western Buddhist country. So Qi Jingchun was planning to take Xiao Yao out of Lizhu cave at the beginning. Either he knew the matter so he could leave with confidence, or he was sure of the matter, but he didn't change his original intention. He just used a blinding method. As for the reason, it's probably the town. The 4-character plaque of that crab shop is out, do your part? To put it simply, in Lu Chen's view, it was like he, senior brother Yudo, and the whole Bai Yujing were all smashed by old man Yao. However, Lu Chen was convinced that since his skills were not as good as others, he stood obediently and was beaten right away. As Lu Chen himself said, it was still too big. Before he left, the mentality of dream interpretation and being brought together was far from enough, but he thought that he had paid enough attention to it. In fact, he still underestimated the background of the Lizhu cave and the complexity of many contexts. The Confucian temple looked at Mr. Qi back then. Did it look like Mr. Bai traveled far to Fuyaozhou with a sword? Well, it's a bit like it, so that's why the little master of the Confucian temple sighed like that. The real murderous intent seems to be due to Mr. Yu Qi's sacrifice of the second natal character. Is Bai Yujing's avenue so big? This is a muddle-headed account of the public saying that the public is reasonable and the wife is reasonable. On the journey, the boy in Naipingxiang has never taken the initiative to go to any Confucian academy, any Taoist temple or temple with a lot of incense. The first time an exception was made, it seemed to be the Xinxiang temple in the blessed land of lotus roots. I often chatted with the old monk and talked about common things. And later the Qinghuan kingdom Jingui Guan participated in the first mountain ceremony in his life. Except for the Shanaya Academy, which was founded by Mr. Qi himself, it was only later that as a hermit he participated in the discussions of the Chinese-Turkish Confucian temple. Before that, the straw shoe boy at that time was like a frog at the bottom of a well. He saw that the water and moon at the bottom of the well did not see the sky, or the sky when he looked up was only the head of the well. Then why are you still willing to hand over a round of bright moon and Haotsai in the wild world to Qingming world, where brother Yu has been sitting for 100 years? Two things: Dou is unwilling to borrow a sword to Mr. Bai across the world. When someone was a visitor to Bai Yujing, he said something strange to Pang Dao, saying that when Brother Dou was in charge of Bai Yujing on the roads of Qingming World, the wheels did not know how many roadside flowers and plants were crushed. Drivers are regarded as ordinary. Peng Dao has not yet figured out what he meant by this sentence. Of course, it's not that Peng Dao doesn't even understand the literal meaning, but it's strange who he is talking about. It's a ghost who is very afraid of ghosts and then finally stopped being afraid of ghosts. In the end, it doesn't seem to matter whether it is afraid or not. Qin Pingon and Lu Chen just chatted all the way and walked back to the yard together. Even the Qing Tong and Nin Taoist did not see anything unusual. Before going down the mountain, Qin Pingon sent a gift to the Lushan Patriarch Hall of the Huangliang School to congratulate the young Jin Dan on his successful peak. It is an arrow of a seal-carved cloud-shaped talisman with the word time inscribed. It comes from the Jade City of the Cloud Print Dynasty in the Wild World, and its cause and effect has been erased by Qin Pingon, who possessed a 14-level Taoist method at that time. Anyway, it is much more valuable than 2 Guyu coins. Earlier on the side of Emperor Huang Tsong, Qin Pingon also gave a gift to celebrate the restoration of Mengliang Kingdom. A piece of bright red ink on the mountain as a gift to the young emperor, with 3 golden words, treasure as gold. In addition, Qin Pingon also gave the young emperor a bamboo pen with the inscription, Everlasting Green, secretly made by the Beiyue Mountain Monarch Mansion in Yunshan Mountain. It is rumored that the green bamboo used to make bamboo pipes comes from the green bamboo of the Qingshan Mountain in the Zhuhai Dongtian of Zhongtu. Therefore, the number is very small and extremely rare. In the Beiyue area of Dei, those who have good deeds have carefully counted them. After so many night outings and banquets, the number of bamboo pens presented by Shanjun Weibo will definitely not exceed 10. Ni Yuanzhan plans to stay in the boundary of Mengliang country for a while longer than expected before returning to the blessed land of Jiang's cloud grottos. Of course, it was to give the golden pill just to whom Ni Yuanzhan had his own plan, and the old Guanju left a clue back then. Just this matter, there is no need to talk to outsiders. As for Qin Pingon and Lu Chen, if both parties can accurately calculate the trend of the matter based on their own ability, it does not matter that there is an old watcher and then act without scruples, then it has nothing to do with Lu Sheng. Qin Pingon learned that Master Ni was going to stay here, so he proceeded along the way and suggested that Master Ni be the honorable guest of the Huangliang school. Ni Yuanzhan didn't care about this. After thinking about it, he agreed and said with a smile, Patriarch Jiang and Yunku Fudi, there is a good word from Shanju Laochen to help. Qin Pingon nodded and said, I think it is not a big problem. I will personally write a letter to Jiang's ancestral hall. In addition, Qin Pingon left a handwritten book of Taoism for Lu Shan, which he entrusted to Ni Fuzi to pass it on. It is said that it is a senior on the mountain who once practiced here, and now this book is waiting for those who are predestined. As for whether it will happen, Qin Pingon is not sure. An opportunity is never determined. Qin Pingon and Guizhujio chatted for a while, and then they were about to leave Lushan and return to Tonggizang. Lu Chen squatted under the eaves and looked at the Tsing-yi boy with a smile. Qin Lingjun hid behind his husband, and silently told himself not to think about anything. The young emperor found Gao Zhen, thanked him sincerely, apologized again and left Lushan. Mengliang country West Yusangshen Maishinjun, and Mochizuki River goddess Nailan Yuji, of course need to be responsible for escorting the emperor back to Beijing. For the young emperor, this trip did not really participate in the climbing trip to observe the ceremony. For the young emperor, it was an extremely pleasant surprise and it was a rewarding experience. Because Qin Lingjun will serve as the royal worship of the Mengliang kingdom, when the ceremony is over, Qin Lingjun will need to take a trip to the capital to become the royal worship of a country, which is no small matter. What's more, now there is an additional process which needs to be filed at Dafu Academy. Gao Zhen and Lushan Patriarch's Hall were overjoyed when they learned that a Jade Pure Realm swordsman was willing to serve as a famous guest of the Huangliang sect. As for the Book of Taoism, Gao Jing knows the importance and the rules of the mountain, and will not publicize it. It will only continue to be placed in a corner of the bookshelf and really wait for the destined person. Gao Zhen also said sincere words to the young hidden official. Mr. Chen actually doesn't need to be like this. This kind of opportunity is clearly lying under our noses, but our Huangliang faction has missed it for many years, whether it is Mr. Chen or that Li Huai, whether it was taking this book secretly or taking it down the mountain with dignity. I dare not say that the whole Huangliang faction has no complaints in his heart, just say that I sit back and there will never be anything wrong with it. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It is precisely because Headmaster Gao can say this that I will give this book to Headmaster Gao, and believe that someday there will be someone from the Huangliang faction who might get this opportunity. Sit back and no longer pretend to say anything, just sigh. If everyone can practice in this way, the mountain is really a mountain." The young Taoist priest named Lu Fu nodded vigorously and said, "Who said it wasn't?" At the same time, the young Taoist priest also stretched out his hand to hold down the head of the boy in Tsingyi next to him, and accompanied him to pecking rice with his chicks. The boy in Tsingyi grinned and endured. "Wait until Lu Zhangjiao has returned to Qingming World and then he will do care about it." Lunar New Year's Eve, Luopa Mountain. Before the New Year's Eve dinner, Nuanshu had been busy all day. Early this morning, before the sky was dark, the girl in the pink skirt began to clean all the houses on the Luopa Mountain, and after the work she carried a bamboo lawn walked down the mountain with Mr. Zhu. When he reached the gate of the mountain, Nuanshu first greeted Taoist chief Xianwei, and then hung the sword talisman of Longquan sword sect at his waist before Yufeng went to the town. In addition to the master's ancestral house on Ni Ping Alley, Nuanshu also has to go to the house on the east side of the town. Mr. Jing has not returned from a long journey. When my sister went to the new site of Jianzhong in Longquan, Lu Xianying left the key to Nuanshu, the little butler of Luopa Mountain. After working on this with Mr. Zhu in the afternoon, I had to help the master to go to the grave. In the bamboo basket, besides a handful of incense, there was also a white porcelain plate with a few slices of tofu and a piece of meat. The glutinous rice cakes were all prepared by Mr. Zhu on the mountain. Although there has always been a woman who doesn't go to the grave in his hometown, Mr. Zhu said it's okay. In the past, when Pei Qian and Xiao Mili were in the mountains, they were always inseparable and would be busy together. This year they both went to Tongyi's house Xindu Mountain. Then I returned to the small town at the ancestral house in Nipping Lane, where I began to post Spring Festival couplets, the Chinese characters for spring and the Chinese characters for blessing. After obtaining the consent of the master before, Nuanshu will also help the house next door to put on new blessing characters and Spring Festival couplets. Then return to the mountain with Mr. Zhu Yufeng and continue to be busy. Mr. Zhu began to wear an apron and got busy in the kitchen. Tomorrow is the first day of the first month of the new year. According to the rules of the master's hometown, every household will set up broomsticks and can rest for a day without doing anything. According to the old saying in the town, otherwise it will be very toiled throughout the year. On the lotus root blessed land, Pei Xiang, the lord of the fox country, and Shui Jiao Hongxiao were all called by Zhu Lian to the Luopa mountain before the meal. And the new janitor who never slowed down in the wind, the sun and the rain, the Daoist chief Xianwei, had already gone up the mountain to eat and drink. In the future no one will rob me of this position. I'm sorry, even if the King of Heaven comes, I don't want to move. You have to be conscientious. You are not a sword immortal or a master of martial arts, or you are a master of cultivating gods. Do you have the face to rob me of such trivial things as gatekeepers? Who have the ability to stand up, come, confront me, Master Dao. I don't say anything. Just go to Qinshanju to help preside over justice. Xianwei Mountain. Early in the morning, the old cook was going to make that New Year's Eve dinner. Xianwei helped the little worm tree and put up the Spring Festival couplets together with the latter. With hands and feet, Xianwei is still happy to help with this trivial matter. Besides, Master Dao, my eyes are like a torch. How can I not see how important the little worm tree is on Qinshan's side? I have to say that the little worm tree often comes to the gate of the mountain, bringing some cakes to eat. 2 small food boxes, the one that is full and the one that is empty, is brought back to the mountain. People's hearts are all flesh-grown, and Dao Master Xianwei feels warm in his heart. After so many years of wandering, I have been stunned and I have suffered too much. If my life experience can be opened up in the old account books, what is written on the upper page is not money, too poor, and the price has risen again, not to mention it. I can't afford to live in the Xianxia Inn, and I dare not even approach the gate there. In the shop at the Xianxia Ferry, I only dare not touch it. It seems that people are often looked down upon, and I can't blame them all. The 3 words helpless. I finally found a place to stay. I thought I was living under the fence with my tail sandwiched. I didn't want to be angry. I never wanted to be here. I really didn't feel wronged at all. I didn't think I would be transported by Xianwei. If Xiao Nuanshu was bullied by someone in the future, I was a little bit wronged. Lao Tzu is not good at fighting, but he must be the first to scold him. Especially the puns of the girl in the pink skirt who heard the Taoist name Immortal Wei, the fake Taoist priest of the real year, almost shed tears on the spot. Our family has a good year this year, and I hope that next year it will be even better. I believe it will definitely be even better. Zhou Xian also called to the back mountain, like a young girl from the Chao clan with a pair of biren. Everyone had a lively New Year's Eve dinner, and after a long time, the pair of Bai people from the Xianxia kingdom of Dali were no longer as cautious as they were when they first went up the mountain. Sun Yuanji went to his home in Zhouqing. Zhou Xian didn't call anyone at Qilong Lane. Sure, Ro has already regarded the shop over there as a home. Pei Qian's big disciple, that little dumb boy, is not too happy to come to this side of the mountain, so he can just have a New Year's Eve dinner together with the white-haired boy who named himself Cui Peanut, the shop next door, and the others. The table is big. After the New Year's Eve dinner, Zhu Lian and Wan Shu cleaned up the dishes and chopsticks. Pei Xiang wanted to intervene, but was stared at by a certain lover and had to give up. Then it was the night watch. On the other side of the town, the old people walked and moved, and now few households have the custom of asking for supper. Little Mwanshu is going to watch the night on the first floor of the bamboo building. In fact, she is not alone. The girl in the pink skirt is sitting by the brazier, and the little lotus girl is lying on her head, reading together. Xianwei had eaten and hurried down the mountain, also reading while watching the night. Jing Dafeng, the former janitor, left a mountain of books, and Xianwei couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The Dafeng brother, who has not yet met, is a role model for our generation. Now that he was here, Hongxia went to Huanghu Mountain to watch the night with Yunzi in the Shui mansion. On the side of Zhu Lian's yard, there was an old blanket on the deck chair. It's just that Zhu Lian sat on the bamboo chair beside him, took a hand stove and let Pei Xiang lie down on the wicker chair. Pei Xiang lay down comfortably with his hands gently stacked, smiling and squinting a pair of Chiushui eyes, and asked casually, "Eating New Year's Eve dinner and vigil with others is an unimaginable thing." Zhu Lian smiled and said, "It is an unimaginable thing to wait until the new thing is not new, and it can be as usual." Pei Xiang turned to his side, folded his hands, his cheeks pressed against the back of his hands. "Anyway, there is no one around, show me?" Seeing that the guy was not talking and pretending to be deaf, Pei Xiang said to him, "Make sure you don't use your hands and feet, you just have an eye addiction." Zhu Lian did not squint, smiled and said, "Where's whoring me?" Pei Xiang exhaled and stared. "What are you talking about? I'll forget it if you are disgusting. How can there be someone who disgusts yourself so much?" Zhu Lian chuckled. Pei Xiangru said, "Yan Fong, can you tell me a story casually?" Zhu Lian laughed and said, "Come again." Pei Xiang complained, "Can you be more serious?" "Serious? You have to talk about the patriarch's intention to come from the West. For thousands of years, so many Buddhist dragons and elephants have only published a scripture." Zhu Lian thought for a while and then said, "Pei Xiang, you should know that the first ancestor of Zen in the vast world was actually the 28th ancestor of the Western Buddhist countries. He was ranked according to the preferences of us vulgar sons." With a confused face, "It seems that you don't know it. I used to read a novel about gods and monsters in my hometown of Fudi. It is an unknown name. At first glance it seems to worship the Buddha, but it is actually a derogation to the Buddha. As for looking back now, it's hard to say. It's probably a Middle-earth monk who made a great aspiration to go to the Western Buddhist country to obtain the truth. Later, the first ancestor and second ancestor of Zen made things difficult and gave the Wuzi Jingshu, and the monk used the precious things on his body to exchange for the Truth Sutra. I was a teenager at that time, not familiar with world affairs and didn't read much. Seeing this, I can't wait to find out that nasty anonymous and hit it. I just feel that Lao Tzu has a hard time stubbornly seeing the end of a book. You, the storyteller, will show me this in the end." "What?" "I didn't realize the meaning until I was middle-aged. The monk got the wordless Buddhist scriptures first. Is it true or false? Later, the true scriptures with words are really true? Need to know Zen Buddhism. One line, it's just that there is no writing, so don't teach it to other people. It's just that when I am old and add again, there will be questions again." Could it be that this monk has already seen through this difficulty at that time, just because he thinks that one person becomes a Buddha, and it is not as good as a multitude to become a Buddha? For ordinary people, it may still need some stages and steps, such as paving roads and bridges. So you see, the future generations of Zen will not have the orthodox struggle for the position of the sixth ancestor, which separates the Nanzong epiphany and the northern sect gradually realize the two veins. Although it was said that the person was divided into the southern sect and the northern sect, the law was not divided into the southern sect and the northern sect. Locally, there is a 1,000-year-old temple at the foot of Nanping Mountain, and the plaque has the 4 characters with equality, which is great. Pei Xiang listened intently. Zhou Xian smiled and said, "Everything that works is like a dreamy bubble, like a dew or electricity. You should observe it like this." Pei Xiang smiled and said, "I still know this sentence." Zhou Xian shook his head and said, "We have only heard of it but we don't really know." Pei Xiang smiled and said, "You have the final say." Zhou Xian held the stove. "I will test you with a puzzle. What kind of flower grows under the ground?" Pei Xiang mistakenly thought it was the mysterious problem of attacking the front, shook his head lest he laughed generously. Zhou Xian smiled and said, "It's peanuts." Pei Xiang was speechless for a while. Zhou Xian laughed and said, "Our millet grains are still amazing. There is one of the beautiful things in the world but the least pleasing to the eyes. Guess what is it?" Zhou Xian asked and replied, "Sleep and get back to sleep." After a ferry crossing the continent, it was like a new small hill appeared, Zhou Mili Chai Wu by Xian Sun Chun Wang, and they were already very familiar with each other. In Bai Xian's words, "It is Sun Chun Wang, a dead fish-eyed girl. Only when we reach the right guardian side, will she have a smiling face that is more ugly than crying." On the side of Luapa Mountain he secretly sealed himself a mountain patrol officer's millet grains, and patrolled the mountain twice in the morning and evening, but he couldn't move it. When you arrive at the Mishue peak of Xindu Mountain, the millet will go to Fengyuan Ferry or go out twice in the morning and evening, but it is slightly different from Luapa Mountain. In Luapa Mountain, after patrolling the mountain, go to Pei Qian and Wanshu sister. They are playing stubbornly on the side of Xindu Mountain, but on the other side of the ferry, spinning around the wind and kite ferry. A little girl in black carrying a cotton bag crossbody, carrying a golden pole on her shoulder, holding a green bamboo stick and not boarding the ferry. She just had fun near the ferry, eating melon seeds, piling stones, skipping grids and going down the mountain early in the morning every day. At noon I went back to the mountain for a meal, and after the meal I went down the mountain quickly. Bai Xian often walked down Mishue Peak with Xiaomi Li wandering around the ferry, but did not delay complaining. "Mi De Jiangxian is retreating on his own site. What are you worried about? Don't talk about the big white goose. And Pei Qian, just as a guest here there are those of Taishu Mountain in Middle Earth, Yi Yunyan of Yunkatang in Pushan and Huangting of Taiping Mountain. They are one by one, which one can't fight. Who dares come to our Xindu Mountain and disturb Mi De Jiangxian's retreat? Those who are celebrating the new year, come here to beg for a fight, right?" Millet just grinned and didn't explain anything. Later Bai Xian talked a lot and the millet grains were still not annoying at all, but with a flash of inspiration he said to Bai Xian, "It's easy to do good things but it's not a good thing." At that time Bai Xian hugged the back of his head with his hands, and walked on the mountain road with a big surprise. The millet cracked loudly. Sister Nwanshu said it, borrowed it and used it. Bai Xian couldn't help asking again, "Since I am in a hurry and want to go to the ferry, why don't you even go up and down the mountain?" Xiaomi Li explained in a serious manner, "The sky is the wind that is to watch the mountains, not to patrol the mountains." Bai Xian thought for a long time but he couldn't refute it. Today, after Bai Xian finished his sword training on the mountain, he came to the ferry from Yufeng from Mixifeng, sat on the railings of the ferry with the millet grains and ate melon seeds. After a long time, from sunset to dusk, Bai Xian raised his head and looked at the sky and said, "Guardian Right, when will you go back to the mountain?" According to the meaning of that big white goose, if Lord Hermit returns to Xindu Mountain today, we will have a New Year's Eve dinner, otherwise we will have the rest. Millet scratched his face and said, "I plan to go back later today." Bai Xian said, "I have to go back to the mountain to practice the sword. Are you afraid to go back alone?" The millet grains laughed. "Bai Xian, you know how to tell jokes now." Bai Xian went back first, pinched a sword tactic and returned to Mishue Peak in a cool and unrestrained manner. On the side of Mishue Peak, the ferry of Taishishan with the road named Dragon Gate, and Huang Ting keenly noticed that there was a sharp and pure sword intent on the side of the ferry almost at the same time, but it was only fleeting. An immortal and a sword repairman in the Jade Pure realm, both sides were extremely surprised. Took only a few days to retreat? Not only did Na Miyu succeed in breaking the boundary but also so quickly he has stabilized the state of mind. One side that Mi Jianxian was indeed a local sword repairman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. One admired that Miyu deserves to have the nickname of Mi Zhanyao. No wonder he can enter the summer residence. Xianxian, in a snow-white robe, walked out of the fairy house and looked up at a house on Xiefeng. He was stunned. Then Yu immediately retracted his gaze and saw the small figure jumping alone near the fairy. Mi's eyes softened all of a sudden. With a lightly tapped toe, her figure floated towards the black-clothed girl. Fearing to scare her, she landed not far in front of her and smiled. Guardian, right, well, you are still patrolling the mountain so late. The millet grains were full of spirits and quickly ran to Yu. Jiangxian, what a coincidence, I just want to return to Mishua Peak. If you are a little later it will be a little while, you can't see me here. I can only meet on the mountain. Yu suddenly said, so it's a coincidence. Seeing how the little girl wanted to ask but didn't dare to ask, Yu squinted and said with a smile, finally break through. The millet grain immediately embraced the golden pole and the green bamboo stick. Both hands stretched out their thumbs and wowed, awesome. One big and one small, slowly walked towards Xindu Mountain together. Yu asked, Xiaomi Li, you know everyone in Luapa Mountain, of course including me, do we all like you? Millet's footsteps are brisk, her shoulders swayed, of course I know. My little head is so brilliant. Yu nodded and said, that's it. Millet hesitated for a while and said softly, but being liked is a very rare thing that needs to be cherished. Alas, it's harder than not being hated, so it's not something that can be shown off. It should be just a happy thing hidden in the heart, and then occasionally when you are in a bad mood, when you open the door you will be happy, and when you open the door you will be in a good mood, so it's called happy. After holding his hands, Yu squinted his eyes. This truth I don't think the hidden officer can tell. Xiaomi Li smiled and said, Pei Qian always said that I am a sycophant. Jiangxian, what do you learn from me? Of course Yu knows that the millet grains must have been waiting outside these days. I hope Yu will be able to open the door. I saw someone waiting for myself. It is rare to see in the mountains under the awe-inspiring world. In the hometown where Xianxia died there were no graves, even more so. And Millet is an exception. She is not waiting for a broken sword fairy. She was just waiting for you, Mi. It was that simple. Mi's eyes were gentle. He squatted down and said softly, Xiaomi Li, thank you. Xiaomi Li grinned. Thank me for what I did. Dajian was so polite that I almost made me angry. The little girl in black scrambled her face and shook her head. When I get angry it can be fierce. Good people and mountain owners must be afraid. Xiaomi Li said in a low voice. Yumi, in fact I also want to thank you. Why? If I say it, remember to keep it secret. Yeah. Make sure not to talk about it on the hidden officer's side. I used to be a door for Pei Qian at home. Alas, every time Pei Qian sees me she won't be as happy as you. Speaking of this, Xiaomi Li hurriedly raised his head. Don't misunderstand, I am not saying that the money is not good. The money is very good. It is good in every way. If I treat the money well I will say one by one. Come out, huh? I'm really not bragging. I can walk all the way to Mixifeng's house. I can't finish talking. It's just a small thing the size of a fingernail. There is no more than a meter as good as you. Ha, everyone in the future you have to follow me and call you Mi Jiangxian. Mi was speechless. His mother, even Yu, aslumber among the flowers, wanted to settle down at this moment, and quickly find a good girl, married a family wife and gave birth to a baby girl like millet grains. Mi Xiefeng a house. The boy in white sits on the railing like a white cloud that stops. Under the eaves of the tall building, a large string of wooden signs such as hanging wind chimes, were filled with the names of words, and the wooden signs were lightly bumped when the wind blew them. There is that autumn eyebrows, earning evil, the mountains are turning green, the water dragons are singing, the eyes are charming, the more leaky, the water is tuned, the divination is slow, the age is long, the flowers and snow are all over the mountains, the lotus leaves are covering the water. The spring is from the sky coming up, dreaming, the storm is set, good things are coming. A Xianxia fairy belonging to the imperial family of Mengliang Kingdom slowly lifted off. Huangliang sect had a private Xianxia fairy in the history, which is the predecessor of the Xianqiang fairy on Yunxia Mountain today. Before Yunxia Mountain changed the name of the fairy, in fact, the fairy is called Tukadu. With the decline of the Huangliang school of incense, first the Tukadu was gradually abandoned because it was unable to make ends meet. Later it was leased to Yunxia Mountain. Later it was simply bought by Yunxia Mountain. It is an idiotic dream to want to buy back the ferry crossing from Yunxia Mountain now, so the Huangliang faction has always wanted to open a new ferry crossing, but it is too difficult. It is very likely that there are two huge Xianxia ferry crossings at the same time, and it is easy for Yunxia Mountain and Huangliang School to have a series of mountain disputes. Therefore His Majesty the Emperor was also very embarrassed before. The palms and backs of the hands were all fleshy. After all, he couldn't be too eccentric to the Huangliang school. Besides, Xianxia Mountain was still a hilltop of the sect candidate, just like the embarrassment before the head of the sect. Can be bright but pretend to be stupid. But before going down the mountain today, the young emperor was not at all embarrassed. He promised that he would allocate a part of Jitian outside the capital to the Huangliang sect to build a Xianxia ferry in the name of rental. For example, the ritual system of Liwen temples has to be prescriptive and exquisite only in terms of direction. It must be located in the seismic position of the capital. As for the size of the Jitian, as long as it guarantees 1,000 acres, it will have a certain degree of flexibility. However, Gaozhen did not agree to the matter, saying that this was too arousing jealousy, and said with a smile, if the old palm of Xianxia Mountain in the mountain knew the law of the old man who came to observe the ceremony, he would not just throw his sleeves and leave. Therefore, sitting back is only asking for a piece of land with good aura to be opened as a ferry in the Xia boundary of Lord Maishan. Inside a house on the ferry, the decoration was simple, and the young emperor began to read the memorials, occasionally laughing and cursing. Naylan Yuji teased, if the head of the high school is in the officialdom, how can he be a six-book? Mei Shanjun stared at her. Your Majesty is dealing with official duties, what are you doing? Huang Tsong put down the pen, rubbed his wrist, glanced at the memorial hill that had been processed, then glanced at the pile of mountains on the side and shook his head helplessly. It was not only mental work but also physical work. Naylan Yuji smiled and asked, Your Majesty, what do you think when you see the hidden official? Huang Tsong smiled and said, It feels more contradictory. Mr. Qin is sitting in distress. When talking to people seriously, he will feel that the summer heat is unavoidable. But when Mr. Qin is chatting with people like a spring breeze, he will feel relaxed and comfortable. Naylan Yuji said, I only have one perception. Huang Tsong curiously said, Talk about it. Naylan Yuji said, Young hidden official seems a little afraid of me? Mr. Maishan said in a bad temper, You can't say it because of you. Huang Tsong laughed loudly and said, I'm on Maishan Jun's side for this matter. Mr. Qin is called a righteous person to drive Fendai. Jun Meishan said with a stern look, Your Majesty, do you need to ask the inspection department of the criminal department to investigate the roots and feet of Lu Fu? I think this guy is acting too absurdly unlike. When Naylan Yuji saw that Mr. Maishan was brewing his words, he said, I don't look like a serious person. Jun Maishan nodded and said, But he doesn't look like a bad person. After all, he followed Qin Yingguan to climb the mountain and watch the salute. Huang Tsong shook his head, leaned on the back of the chair, stretched his arms, that is, Jun Mei is here. If only the water empress of the Mochizuki River was present, the young emperor could not wait to raise his feet, put them on the table and wave his hands. There is no need for extra branches. It's just a passerby on the mountain, and it's hard to meet again if you pass by. Naylan Yuji couldn't help but smile and said, Why does Qin Zhenxian have such a nonchalant friend? Interesting is really interesting, dare to say anything, bragging is not costly. Huang Tsong thought for a while. I always feel that they don't look like friends, it's just a feeling anyway. The young emperor was suddenly annoyed. I knew that I was in Lushan, so I should have asked Mr. Qin to help me write down the book samples in the auspicious language for the opening of the spring of Mengliang country this year. The monarchs of all countries in the world have the custom of welcoming the new year, and the emperor needs to stay up for the world. Halfway through the age, when the new year comes, there will be the with the eunuch's palm seal holding a white jade candle to illuminate the emperor, and the will hand a royal pen to the eunuch. In the auspicious words of New Year, Vientian Renewal, Haiyan Hiqing Shurhan Yenfeng and Spring Festival Happy, posting these auspicious notes in several important halls of the inner court is called opening the pen. The emperor symbolically scanned the New Year's calendar compiled by Qin Tianjian, which means that the monarch of a country has provided time and saved years for the common people of a country. Later, the words blessing, longevity, and spring will be written again to bestow courtiers. This is also an important reason why Huang Tsong left Lushan in a hurry. Naylan Yuji smiled and said, It doesn't take long to leave Lushan. You can turn the bow of the ship. Huang Tsong was obviously moved. Is this not suitable? Jun Maishan noticed the emperor's sight and said helplessly, Your Majesty sees what I do. Huang Tsong smiled and said, I still have a feeling, the three of us, it's just that you are the closest to Mr. Qin. It's rare for Maishinjun to smile all over his face. Huang Tsong turned his head and looked at the goddess of water. Well, my flattering skill, is it perfect for me? Nailan Yuji covered her mouth and smiled. Your Majesty is the 9th 5-year-old, why bother to please a mountain monarch? Huang Tsong nodded. Widows really need top lease, only the people of one country. Outside the window of the house, someone was lying on the windowsill with his hands and probed his head inside. A familiar face was just a crown on his head. The fishtail crown was replaced with a lotus crown. The young Taoist priest raised a hand holding a rolled paper and said with a smile, Don't make an order to chase away guests. The poor road is here to make the emperor's wish come true. He writes auspicious words. It's written on it, although it's not Xianxia's autograph, but you don't know that Xianxia's words are all learned from the poor Dao. Do you think it's not like it? Your Majesty, you can think of it as Xianxianju the real thing. Mr. Maishin was about to shout angrily, reprimanding this completely unruly Taoist priest. Nailan Yuji found it more interesting. But the young emperor had already stood up, bowed his head towards the window and clasped his fists. Mengliang country Huang Tsong, pay homage to Master Lu. Lu Chen leaned on the windowsill, tilted his head. Huh? So smart. Just say it. He has good ears and eyes. He understands everything and can see everything. The name is so good. Fortunately, Mr. Maishin said, still calm, but Nailan Yuzi's face was pale and colorless. I saw the Lu Zhangjiao. A harrier turned over and fell to the ground, spreading the rolled paper on the table. The 16 characters written on the paper is really a good auspicious sentence. The weather is smooth, the grains are abundant, the world is peaceful, the country is peaceful and the people are peaceful. Lu Chen left the house with the young emperor and walked to the bow. Huang Tsong asked, What is the command of Master Lu? Lu Chen asked with a smile, What if the poor Dao wants you to deal with Chen Pingon? Regardless of success or failure, I will give you a splendid wealth, how about it? Huang Tsong just shook his head. Lu Chen asked again, Then if poor Dao changed its terms, could the people living in this dream of Liangguo live and work in peace and contentment for hundreds of years? Huang Tsong still shook his head. Lu Chen smiled and said, Don't be so nervous, Pang Dao just said casually. Huang Tsong's body is still tight, unconsciously already sweating. Lu Chen said, When you look back to Chao Rong, you say that Master Lu Chen has ordered him to take care of Mengliang country. Let's take 300 years as the deadline. Huang Tsong wanted to speak but stopped. Lu Chen moved his sleeves with both hands and said indifferently, You just do it. Huang Tsong nodded, clasped his fist and said, Thanks to Zhangjiao Lu for the decree. Lu Chen stretched out his sleeves and leaned on the railing. The young man smiled and went out, and the wind fell for thousands of miles. Now the blue shirt is back with his sword, and the mountains and rivers are full of spring breeze. I don't know what the prime of life and the old age are. With the world as a cage, the bird has nowhere to escape. In the world, the young man thinks the most innocent. The beauty gave me the wrong knife. Jianqi Great Wall Jianqi is near. Going into the depths of the lotus root by mistake. Observe Taoism, Taoism and Taoism. Drawing the ground by myself is a prison, and I have been dealing with me for a long time. The distant tourists looked up and saw the moon in their hearts. Learning is the hardest to sail at night, to travel in the opposite direction of life, and to travel at night with candles. The sword repairs the lack of ground, and the heavenly man chooses the official. Looking at the lives of others is like turning a book, so what about the next book? Lu Chen took out a pot of wine, uncovered the mud seal, took a sip of the fermented ferment, looked up at Tongyi's Hao to the south, then glanced at a place in Aquarius Island and said to himself, Fuxing Yiming is with me, I will also go to Jiuhong. I'm gone. Finally, Lu Chen glanced again at the central part of Tongyi's Hao in the south. His figure turned into a rainbow and went to the sky. The third head teacher of Bai Yujing, without the Confucian accompaniment, broke through the vast world. The sky curtain go directly to Bai Yujing under the Qingming world, and then at the highest point I looked around, flicked my eyes and saw where the 14th level monks were located in the dojo or the current figure. Whether it is hidden or open, Lu Chen with a panoramic view, he stretched his waist and murmured, I have advanced for 500 years of new ideas, and after the millennium I will feel new. It's a good idea to introduce new ideas.